The moment Lena Brooks saw the two men outside the diner window, she knew someone was about to die. Their shoulders were too tense. Their eyes tracked the door like wolves watching a wounded deer. She'd spent 6 years in this harborside dive, learning to read danger the way other people read menus, and every instinct screaming in her gut said the same thing: blood was coming. The man in booth 7, expensive suit, careful eyes, the kind of presence that made other customers unconsciously lean away, was finishing his coffee, completely unaware. Lena had 30 seconds to decide if she was the type of person who looked away. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The fluorescent lights in Sal's diner had been flickering since 2019, casting everything in a strobing half-darkness that made the vinyl booths look older than they were. Lena Brooks had stopped noticing it years ago, the same way she'd stopped noticing the perpetual smell of burnt coffee and the way the floor tiles stuck to your shoes when it rained. You worked somewhere long enough, the flaws became invisible. People, though. People she noticed. She'd learned early that survival in a place like this, in a city like Harborview, where the salt air carried the stink of fish guts and diesel fuel, where the line between legitimate business and something darker was drawn in pencil, meant paying attention. Not the obvious kind of attention, the staring kind that got you labeled nosy or worse, the quiet kind. The kind where you refilled coffee and wiped tables and existed like wallpaper while your brain cataloged every detail that didn't fit. Tonight, plenty didn't fit. The two men outside had been there for 11 minutes. Lena knew because she'd checked the clock above the register when they first appeared, leaning against a rusted Civic across the street. They weren't smoking, weren't on their phones, just standing there, watching the diner entrance with the kind of focus that made her shoulders tighten. Inside, booth 7. The man had walked in 20 minutes ago, alone, which was unusual for someone who moved like he owned the air around him. Mid-40s, dark hair going silver at the temples, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lena made in 3 months. He'd ordered black coffee and sat facing the door, always facing the door, she'd noticed, the way cops and soldiers did. 2 other men had been with him initially, flanking him like bookends when he entered, but they'd positioned themselves separately. One at the counter, barely touching his pie. Another by the window in booth 2, newspaper spread out but never turning the pages. Security, maybe. Or just careful friends. The man in 7 had made 3 phone calls, each under 2 minutes. His voice never rose above a murmur, but Lena had caught fragments when she'd refilled his cup. Tomorrow night, then. The warehouse, not the office. I don't care what Victor says. It's happening. Make sure they understand the terms. No negotiations. Not a businessman. Or not just a businessman. Lena had worked Sal's long enough to recognize the Harbor District's particular flavor of clientele. Longshoremen who smelled like sweat and metal. Truckers who paid in crumpled bills and never made eye contact. The occasional lawyer or city official slumming it for authenticity. And sometimes, not often, but enough that you learned the signs, men who conducted the kind of business that happened in shadows. This man was the latter. You gonna stand there all night, or you gonna pour? Lena blinked. She'd been gripping the coffee pot so long her knuckles had gone white. The trucker in booth 4 was holding up his empty mug, irritation creasing his sunburned face. Sorry. She moved on autopilot, filling his cup, manufacturing a smile that felt like pulling on a mask. Long shift. Ain't they all? She glanced toward the window. The 2 men were still there. One of them, the shorter one with the neck tattoo visible above his collar, adjusted something under his jacket. The movement was subtle, practiced, but Lena's stomach dropped anyway. Gun. She'd seen enough weapons in Harborview to recognize the shape of someone carrying. The docks attracted a certain kind of worker, the kind who settled disputes with fists or worse, and Sal's sat right on the boundary between the commercial district and the neighborhood locals called the stacks, rows of shipping containers converted into housing, businesses, and whatever else people needed when zoning laws were suggestions. But this felt different. The man in booth 7 was standing now, pulling cash from a leather wallet. 320s, way too much for a single coffee. He left them on the table without waiting for change and buttoned his suit jacket with the careful precision of someone performing a ritual. His security detail shifted. The one at the counter set down his fork. The one by the window folded his newspaper. Outside, the two men straightened. Lena's heart kicked against her ribs. She should stay out of it. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't her problem, isn't it? She'd survived 6 years in this city by keeping her head down, by being the waitress nobody remembered. Getting involved in whatever this was, a hit, a robbery, something worse, that was how you ended up as a cautionary tale, a name mentioned in hushed tones by people who knew better. The man from booth 7 walked toward the door. Lena moved before she could think about it. Wait. The word came out quieter than she'd intended, barely audible over the hiss of the kitchen fryer and the tinny radio playing something old and sad. But the man stopped, turned, his eyes, dark, measuring, completely unreadable, fixed on her. Excuse me? His voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet, the kind of voice that expected immediate answers. Lena's mouth went dry. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to apologize, to say she'd made a mistake, to let him walk out that door, and whatever happened next happened without her fingerprints on it. But she saw it again, the way the man outside adjusted his jacket, saw the other one's hand drift toward his hip. There are 2 men outside, she said, quieter now, stepping closer so the other customers wouldn't hear. They've been watching the door since you sat down. They're armed. The silence that followed felt like standing on ice waiting for it to crack. The man's expression didn't change, didn't flicker with surprise or fear or gratitude. He just looked at her, really looked, the way you'd examine something unexpected and potentially valuable. Are they now? It wasn't a question. One of his security guys was already moving, the one from the counter, closing the distance with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He was younger, early 30s maybe, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and the build of someone who'd played college football and never stopped training. Boss? His hand rested casually near his waistband. The man from booth 7 held up one finger. Wait, without breaking eye contact with Lena. You're certain? Yes. Why tell me? The question threw her. She fumbled for an answer that made sense, that didn't sound stupid or naive or like she'd been watching too many movies. Because, she swallowed, because I don't want anyone to get hurt. Something almost like amusement touched the corner of his mouth. Consider it. He turned to his man. Marcus, check it. Marcus moved to the window, angling himself so he could see the street without being obvious about it. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She's right. 2 contacts, east side of the street. One's got a piece under his jacket, poor concealment. Other one's trying too hard to look casual. The man nodded once, like this confirmed something he'd already suspected. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. How long have you worked here? He asked Lena. 6 years. You notice things. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. It's a useful skill. More than useful. He studied her for another long moment, then reached into his jacket. Lena tensed, stupid, reflexive. But he only pulled out a business card. Plain white stock, no logo. Just a name and a phone number. Marco DeLuca. If you ever get tired of pouring coffee, he said, call that number. Before Lena could respond, the diner's front window exploded. The sound was enormous, a percussive crack that swallowed every other noise and replaced it with ringing silence. Glass showered inward in a glittering cascade, and Lena's brain went blank with shock. Someone was screaming, maybe her, maybe someone else. And then Marcus was there, shoving her down behind the counter hard enough that her shoulder slammed into the lower cabinets. Stay down! More shots. 3, 4, impossible to count. The coffee maker behind her shattered, spraying hot liquid and grounds across the tile. The smell of gunpowder mixed with burnt coffee, acrid and choking. Lena pressed herself flat against the floor, hands over her head, every muscle locked tight. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Sal's diner was boring, it was safe, it was the place where nothing ever... Another shot. Then silence. Not complete silence. People were crying. Someone was whimpering. The radio was still playing that sad old song like the universe hadn't just tilted sideways, but the shooting had stopped. Lena's hearing came back in pieces. Footsteps, shouting. The distant wail of sirens, fast response for this neighborhood, which meant someone important was involved. Clear! Marcus's voice, hard and professional. A hand touched her shoulder and Lena flinched so hard she cracked her elbow against the cabinet. Easy, it's over. Marcus was crouched beside her, gun in hand but pointed at the floor. You hurt? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Good. Stay here until the cops arrive. Don't talk to anyone about what you saw. What? But he was already moving, helping the man from booth 7, DeLuca, Marco DeLuca, toward the back exit. The second security guard was with them, covering their retreat with his body positioned between them and the shattered window. Lena caught DeLuca's eyes one last time as they reached the kitchen door. He nodded at her. Then they were gone. The police arrived 4 minutes later. Lena knew because she counted every second, still pressed against the floor behind the counter, her brain refusing to process what had just happened. The detective's name was Chen, and she had the exhausted look of someone who'd seen this exact scene too many times. Walk me through it again. Lena sat in booth 4. The trucker had left the moment the first squad car arrived, with a blanket someone had given her wrapped around her shoulders despite the summer heat. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I was working my shift. The window broke. People started shooting. I hid. You didn't see the shooters? No. What about before the shooting? Anyone acting suspicious? The business card was still in her apron pocket. She could feel it there, a small rectangle of damning evidence. It was a normal night, Lena said. Busy. I wasn't paying attention to people outside. Detective Chen's pen stopped moving. You work here 6 years, according to your boss. You strike me as someone who pays attention. I serve coffee and take orders, that's all. The detective studied her with eyes that had probably sat across from 1,000 liars and knew every tell. But Lena had learned young how to make her face a blank wall, how to exist without being seen. Growing up in foster care taught you that. Survive by being invisible, by giving them nothing to grab onto. The men who were sitting in here, Chen said, consulting her notes. Booth 7, the counter, booth 2. You remember them? Customers. They paid cash and left before the shooting. Convenient timing. Lena said nothing. Chen sighed, closed her notebook. You're lying. I know you're lying. But I also know this neighborhood, and I know how things work here. So here's what I'm going to tell you. She leaned forward, voice dropping. Whatever you think you saw, whatever you think happened, the smart play is to forget it. Men like the ones who were in here tonight, they operate in a world where witnesses don't do well. Understand? Lena nodded. Good. Chen stood, dropped her card on the table, much less elegant than DeLuca's, dog-eared and coffee-stained. But if you change your mind, if you remember something you want to talk about, call me. Anytime. After the police left, after the crime scene techs packed up their cameras and evidence bags, after Sal showed up swearing in 3 languages about his insurance rates, Lena finally went home. Her apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had been condemned twice and kept getting temporary reprieves because the city didn't have anywhere to put the tenants. The hallway smelled like old curry and someone's perpetual marijuana habit. The lock stuck like always. Inside, Lena locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and shoved a chair under the handle before she let herself feel anything. Then she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and shook. Not from fear, or not just fear. From the adrenaline crash, from the weight of what she'd done. She'd warned a man. A dangerous man, clearly. The kind of man people shot at in public. And in doing so, she'd stepped out of the shadows she'd spent 6 years hiding in. The business card sat on her kitchen counter where she'd placed it with trembling hands. Marco DeLuca. She could throw it away. Pretend tonight never happened. Go back to being invisible. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Lena stared at it for 10 seconds before answering. Miss Brooks? DeLuca's gravel velvet voice, unmistakable. I wanted to thank you personally for your discretion with the police. How did you... No, you didn't talk? I have friends in various places. Also, you're still alive, which suggests you made smart choices. Lena's mouth tasted like metal. I don't want any trouble. Too late for that, I'm afraid. You saved my life tonight. That creates complications. I didn't. You noticed a threat I missed. More importantly, you acted on it, knowing the risk. A pause. That's rare. Useful. I'm a waitress. You're observant, quick-thinking, and apparently skilled at deflecting police inquiries, all qualities I value highly. Another pause, longer this time. I'd like to offer you a job. Lena laughed, the sound coming out brittle and slightly unhinged. You don't even know me. I know you've worked at Sal's Diner for 6 years despite being overqualified. I know you have no family in Harborview and minimal social connections. I know your apartment costs $800 a month and you're 2 weeks late on rent. I know... Stop, her voice cracked. Just stop. Silence. How much does a job with you pay? The question came out before she could stop it. Substantially more than waitressing, plus protection, which you're going to need. Why would I need protection? Because the men who tried to kill me tonight will review security footage, witness statements, and will eventually identify you as the person who warned me. When that happens, they'll want to have a conversation. Ice flooded Lena's veins. You're saying I'm in danger because I helped you? Yes. That's the reality of the situation. I'm offering you a choice. Work for me, where I can keep you safe and compensate you appropriately. Or don't, and handle the consequences alone. His tone softened fractionally. For what it's worth, I prefer the first option. I dislike owing debts, and I very much dislike people under my protection getting hurt. Lena closed her eyes. What kind of work? The kind you're already good at. Watching, noticing, telling me when things don't fit. You want me to spy for you? I want you to do what you did tonight, see what others miss. I have people who handle violence and logistics. What I need is someone invisible, someone people don't notice or remember, someone who can sit in a room and catalog everything wrong with it. That's insane. Perhaps, but you're considering it anyway, which suggests you understand how limited your alternatives are. He was right. Lena hated that he was right, but 6 years of barely surviving had taught her to recognize when the ground was shifting under her feet. If DeLuca was telling the truth, and the professional way his security had handled the shooting suggested he was, then she'd painted a target on herself the moment she opened her mouth. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow evening. After that, my offer expires and you're on your own. He rattled off an address in the business district, the kind of neighborhood where buildings had doormen and Lena's entire wardrobe would mark her as out of place. 6 p.m. My people will be expecting you. The line went dead. Lena sat in her apartment for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the walls close in. Tomorrow she had a shift at Sal's. Tips would be good. Tragedy tourism always brought in curious customers. She could work, keep her head down, pretend tonight was an anomaly. Except the men who'd tried to kill DeLuca knew what she looked like now. Or they would soon. She thought about Detective Chen's warning, about the business card still sitting on her counter, about 6 years of invisible survival that had just gone up in smoke. At some point during the night, she made a decision. The building had a doorman. Lena had never been in a building with a doorman before. He wore a uniform, actual brass buttons and everything, and looked at her like he was trying to decide if she was lost or selling something. I'm here to see Marco DeLuca, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. The doorman's expression shifted subtly. Name? Lena Brooks? He made a phone call, murmured something she couldn't hear, then nodded. Penthouse, elevators to your left. The elevator was the kind with mirrors and soft lighting that made Lena hyper-aware of her thrift store jeans and the coffee stains on her sneakers. She'd worn her least awful shirt, plain black, no visible holes. But standing in that ascending box of polished brass and muted jazz, she felt like an imposter. The penthouse level had a single door. It opened before she could knock. Marcus, the security guy from the diner, stood there in a different suit but the same alert posture. His scar looked more pronounced in the hallway lighting. Miss Brooks, come in. The apartment beyond was nothing like what Lena had expected. No gold fixtures or modern art or the kind of aggressive luxury she'd seen in magazines. Instead, hardwood floors worn soft with age, bookshelves crammed with actual books, furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the harbor, ships moving like slow thoughts across dark water. Marco DeLuca sat in a leather chair near the windows, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered. You came. I don't have a lot of choices. Honest. I appreciate that. He set the tablet aside, gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Lena sat, feeling like she was in a play and had forgotten her lines. First, DeLuca said, we should establish some ground rules. You work for me, you keep what you see and hear confidential. You don't talk to police without my lawyer present. You follow instructions, but you're allowed, encouraged even, to question orders that seem wrong. I value independent thinking. What exactly would I be doing? Initially, learning. Marcus will teach you how to spot surveillance, how to read people, how to stay safe. You'll accompany me to meetings, restaurants, social events. You'll watch and tell me what you notice. Why not use Marcus for that? Marcus is excellent at his job, which is keeping me alive, but he's intimidating. People behave differently around obvious security. You, on the other hand, DeLuca smiled slightly. You're invisible, a waitress, an assistant, someone people ignore while you're standing right there. It should have felt insulting. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in years. What if I see something illegal? Then you'll have choices to make about your conscience versus your survival. I won't lie to you, Miss Brooks. The business I conduct exists in gray areas, sometimes darker than gray. You'll see things that might conflict with your sense of morality. Are you a criminal? The directness of the question surprised even Lena, but DeLuca just laughed. A real laugh, warm and unexpected. That depends on who you ask. The police would say I'm a person of interest. My lawyers would say I'm a legitimate businessman. The truth is somewhere in the middle. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'll tell you what I am, practical. I provide services people need, make deals that benefit multiple parties, and occasionally resolve disputes that can't be handled through conventional channels. Sometimes that crosses legal lines. But I don't deal drugs. I don't tolerate violence against civilians, and I keep my word. That's more than most can say in this city. Lena thought about the diner shooting. Someone wants you dead. Several someones, probably. Occupational hazard. That doesn't scare you? It keeps me alert. His expression turned serious. Last night's attempt wasn't random. Someone inside my organization is feeding information to competitors. They knew where I'd be, when I'd be vulnerable. That's why I need you. I don't understand. My existing security team is loyal, but they're known quantities. Anyone conducting surveillance would identify them immediately. You, however, he gestured at her ordinary clothes and forgettable face. You could sit in a room full of my enemies, and they'd never look twice. You could overhear conversations meant to be private. You could notice patterns my regular people would miss. The pieces clicked together. You want me to find whoever's betraying you. Eventually, yes. First, I want you to learn how to stay alive while doing it. Lena looked out the windows at the harbor. Somewhere out there was her apartment, her job at Sal's, her small, careful life. She could walk away right now, take her chances with whoever came looking. How much? She asked. DeLuca named a figure that made her blink. That's per week, plus expenses, lodging if you need it, and a signing bonus to clear your outstanding debts. It was more money than Lena had ever imagined having, more than she'd make in 2 years at the diner. And if I say no, then I'll provide you with enough cash to leave Harborview and start over somewhere else. I'll also provide a new identity if you want it. Like I said, I don't like owing debts. The offer was genuinely tempting. A chance to disappear, to be someone else somewhere else. But Lena had been running her whole life. Through foster homes, through bad relationships, through cities that chewed people up, and she was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of surviving instead of living. When do I start? She heard herself say. DeLuca smiled. Right now. Marcus will get you set up with an apartment, somewhere secure, better than your current situation. You'll need clothes appropriate for various situations, which we'll arrange, and we'll start your training tomorrow. What kind of training? The kind that keeps you alive. The new apartment was in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, the kind of neighborhood where galleries existed next to craft breweries and everything cost twice what it should. Lena's unit was on the 3rd floor, exposed brick and high ceilings and more space than she knew what to do with. Security systems already installed, Marcus said, showing her the keypad. Code changes weekly. I'll text you. Windows are reinforced glass. Doors solid core with a deadbolt that'll stop anything short of a battering ram. This seems excessive. Last night, someone tried to kill my boss with you standing 10 feet away. Excessive doesn't exist in my vocabulary anymore. He handed her a phone, newer than anything she'd owned, sleek and probably expensive. This is yours. My number's programmed in, along with DeLuca's and a few others. You see anything weird, anyone following you, anything that feels wrong, you call immediately. I've lived in Harborview for 6 years. I know how to handle myself. Marcus gave her a look that suggested he'd heard that before from people who were now dead. With respect, Miss Brooks, you know how to be invisible in a diner. This is different. The people looking for vulnerabilities in DeLuca's operation, they're professionals. Former military, intelligence operatives, career criminals who've survived decades in this business. They will find you if you're not careful. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. He walked to the door, paused. Training starts tomorrow, 8 a.m. Get some sleep. You'll need it. After he left, Lena explored her new space with the surreal feeling that she'd stepped into someone else's life. The furniture was simple but solid. The kitchen had appliances that actually worked. The bathroom had water pressure. She sat on the edge of the bed, a real bed, not a futon or a mattress on the floor, and pulled out her old phone. 3 missed calls from Sal, probably wondering why she hadn't shown up for her shift. 2 texts from Deborah, the other waitress, asking if she was okay. Lena typed out a message. Something came up. I won't be coming back. Sorry for no notice. She hit send before she could overthink it. Then she turned off of the phone and sat in the expensive silence of her new apartment, feeling like she'd just jumped off a cliff and was still waiting to see if she'd land or fall. Training was not what Lena expected. Marcus picked her up at 7:45 in a nondescript sedan and drove to a warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of building that looked abandoned but clearly wasn't. Inside, the space had been converted into something between a gym and a tactical training facility. First rule, Marcus said, tossing her a water bottle. Stay aware. Always. You're thinking about what you're making for dinner, what you need from the grocery store, whatever. You're vulnerable. Clear? Lena nodded. Show me. Show you what? What you noticed on the drive here. Lena blinked, scrambling. We took Harbor Street to... Wrong answer. I don't care about the route. What did you notice? Cars following us? People paying too much attention? Anything that felt wrong? I didn't think to... Exactly. And if someone had been tailing us, you'd be useless. He wasn't being mean, just factual, which somehow made it worse. Try again. Think about the last 5 minutes. What do you remember? Lena closed her eyes, forced herself to replay the drive. There was a blue truck 3 cars back that took the same turns we did for 6 blocks. A woman on the corner near the warehouse entrance who was looking at her phone but angled so she could see the door. And you checked your mirrors more than normal drivers do. When she opened her eyes, Marcus was almost smiling. Better. The truck was mine. 2nd layer security. The woman was a homeless regular, not surveillance. But you noticed them, which means you can learn. He gestured to the warehouse floor. Over the next few weeks, you're going to learn how to read people, how to spot weapons, how to identify surveillance. You're going to learn basic self-defense, not to win fights, but to create enough space to run. You're going to learn how to lie convincingly and how to spot when others are lying. Think of it as a crash course in survival. And after that, you start earning your salary. The training was harder than anything Lena had ever done. Marcus ran her through scenarios until she wanted to scream, walking through mock crowds identifying which civilians were watching her, sitting in simulated meetings, and later recounting every detail, learning to read body language and micro-expressions. Some days they brought in other people. DeLuca's associates mostly, hard-eyed men and a few women who looked at Lena like she was a curiosity. She learned their names, their roles, the hierarchy of DeLuca's operation without anyone explicitly teaching her. There was Vincent, who handled logistics and always smelled like expensive cologne. Rita, who managed financial operations and had a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. A younger guy named Tommy, who did enforcement, a polite word for muscle, and talked too much when he was nervous. Lena absorbed it all, filed it away in the mental catalog she'd been building her entire life. 3 weeks in, DeLuca summoned her to his office. Marcus says you're ready, he said without preamble. I want you to prove it. How? Tomorrow night, I'm meeting with a potential business partner. Anton Volkov. He runs shipping operations out of the North Harbor. It's a preliminary discussion, feeling each other out. You'll accompany me as my new assistant. What am I looking for? Anything that doesn't fit. Volkov's been pushing for this meeting for months, which makes me suspicious. He claims he wants to expand our distribution partnership, but I think there's more to it. I want to know what. The meeting was at a restaurant Lena couldn't have afforded to breathe near. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters moved like dancers. She wore a dress Marcus had picked out, simple black, professional, forgettable, and carried a tablet like she belonged there. Anton Volkov was a bear of a man, easily 6'4", with the kind of presence that made the expensive restaurant feel small. He'd brought his own assistant, a thin woman with sharp eyes who took notes throughout the dinner. Lena sat slightly behind DeLuca, present but not part of the conversation, and watched. Volkov was nervous. Not obviously. His voice stayed steady. His hands didn't shake. But he touched his water glass too often, glanced at his assistant before answering questions, laughed half a second too late at DeLuca's subtle jokes. The assistant, though, she was different, cool, controlled, eyes constantly scanning the room. She made eye contact with Lena exactly once, a brief flat assessment that made Lena's skin prickle. Halfway through the dinner, Volkov excused himself to take a call. His assistant stayed, ostensibly reviewing her notes, but Lena saw her hand drift toward her purse when a waiter passed too close. Weapon, definitely armed. When Volkov returned, the conversation shifted to logistics, routes, schedules, percentages. Numbers that Lena didn't fully understand but recognized as important. DeLuca was giving nothing away, his responses measured and non-committal. "We should discuss this in more detail," Volkov said as dessert arrived. "Perhaps at my office? I could show you the new facilities, give you a better sense of our capabilities." "Perhaps," DeLuca said. "My schedule is quite full, but I'll have my assistant check availability." That was Lena's cue. She pulled up the calendar on her tablet, made a show of reviewing it. "You have an opening Thursday afternoon." "Thursday works," Volkov said immediately. Too immediately. Red flag. The dinner ended with handshakes and promises to be in touch. In the car afterward, DeLuca waited until they'd driven 3 blocks before speaking. "Well?" "He's lying," Lena said. "About what?" "I don't know, but he's not comfortable with his own pitch. And his assistant is former military or law enforcement. The way she moved, her awareness, that's professional training. You noticed the weapon?" "In her purse, yes." DeLuca smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "What else?" "The Thursday meeting. He wanted that specific day too badly, like he'd been waiting for you to suggest a time frame and jumped on the first option." Meaning? Meaning Thursday matters to him. Either something's happening that day that he wants you present for, or he needs to know you'll be occupied. Lena hesitated. "You're not actually going to that meeting, are you?" "I haven't decided yet, but your observations give me options." He looked at her with something that might have been approval. "You did well tonight, better than I expected." Coming from DeLuca, it felt like high praise. "So what happens now?" Lena asked. "Now we see what Thursday brings, and we start digging into why Anton Volkov is so interested in my schedule." The answer came sooner than expected. Marcus picked Lena up the next morning with his jaw tight and his driving faster than usual. "What's wrong?" "Someone hit one of our warehouses last night, South District, where we store import inventory. They knew exactly when the security rotation changed, exactly where the cameras had blind spots. Took about 200,000 in merchandise and disappeared." "You think it's connected to Volkov?" "Boss does. The timing's too convenient." Marcus took a corner hard enough that Lena grabbed the door handle. "He wants you to do some digging, quietly." "What kind of digging?" "The kind where you use that invisible thing you do to get information no one wants to give you." Which was how Lena found herself back in a world she understood, working the counter at a harborside dive bar called the Rusty Anchor. The owner, a man named Eddie who asked no questions when Marcus slipped him cash, introduced her as his niece picking up extra shifts. The regulars barely looked at her, perfectly invisible again, except this time she was hunting. Longshoremen talked when they drank, So did warehouse workers, truckers, the occasional low-level criminal trying to look important. Lena poured drinks and wiped spills and listened. Second night in, a dock worker named Ray started complaining about his boss, how Volkov's operation was suddenly hiring extra security for some big shipment coming Thursday. "Never seen them this locked down," Ray said into his beer. "Whatever's coming in, it ain't regular cargo." Lena kept her expression neutral. "Must be paying well for all that security." "Overtime for everyone. Even got some out-of-town muscle coming in, professional types. My buddy says they're expecting trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Ray shrugged. "Above my pay grade. I just load and unload. But something's happening Thursday, that's for damn sure." Lena texted Marcus from the bathroom. "Thursday. Big shipment, heavy security, out-of-town professionals involved." His response came back immediately. "Good work. Finish your shift and come in." Boss wants details. DeLuca's office, his real office, in a building downtown that legally housed an import-export consulting firm, was dark except for the desk lamp when Lena arrived. Marcus stood by the window. DeLuca sat behind his desk studying a map of the harbor district. "Tell me everything," DeLuca said. Lena recounted the conversation, every detail she could remember. "Professional security from out of town," DeLuca mused, "for a Thursday shipment that coincides with Volkov's invitation. He wanted me at his office while something else happened elsewhere." "A distraction?" Lena suggested. "Or an alibi. If something goes wrong with the shipment, he can claim he was in a meeting with me, nowhere near the docks." DeLuca tapped the map. "The question is, what's in that shipment worth this much trouble?" "Could be anything," Marcus said. "Weapons, drugs, people." "Volkov doesn't deal in people. He's got standards, limited as they are." DeLuca's finger traced a route on the map. "But weapons, that's possible. There's been chatter about Eastern European arms making their way into the city. If Volkov's bringing in something significant without clearing it with the rest of us, that's a declaration of intent," Marcus finished. Lena felt lost. "I don't understand." DeLuca looked up. "The harbor operations have an understanding. Major moves, particularly anything that could draw federal attention, get discussed among the key players. It's not about permission exactly, but courtesy. Awareness. If Volkov's bringing in a weapons shipment without that conversation, he's either monumentally stupid or planning something." "Planning what?" "That," DeLuca said, "is what you're going to help me find out." Over the next 72 hours, Lena learned that watching people wasn't just about seeing. It was about context, pattern, the space between what someone said and what they meant. DeLuca had her shadow different members of his organization, not to spy on them exactly, but to understand how information moved. Who talked to whom? Which conversations happened in offices and which happened in parking lots? The difference mattered. Vincent, the logistics guy, met with shipping contacts at restaurants during lunch hours. Everything documented and professional. But twice Lena watched him take calls in his car afterward, windows up, face tight with concentration. Those conversations never made it into his reports. Rita handled money with the precision of a surgeon, but she had a gambling problem she thought nobody knew about. Lena spotted it in the way Rita's hand shook slightly on Friday afternoons, the casino receipts crumpled in her car's cup holder, the tension that disappeared after her weekly poker game. Tommy, the muscle, was sleeping with someone he shouldn't be. Lena didn't know who, but she recognized the signs. The extra attention to appearance on certain days, the secretive phone calls, the way he lied badly about his evening plans. She documented everything in a notebook that never left her possession, using a shorthand she'd developed that would look like grocery lists to anyone else. "You're building a web," DeLuca said when she showed him her observations during their weekly debrief. They sat in his office late on a Wednesday night, the city sprawling below them in lights and shadow. "Each piece of information is a thread. Enough threads and you can see the whole picture." "Is that what you do?" Lena asked. "See pictures?" "I see leverage. Someone's gambling habit is a vulnerability. An affair is a pressure point. None of this means I'll use it, but knowing it exists gives me options." He poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter, offered her one. She shook her head. "You're uncomfortable with that." It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. "It feels like collecting ammunition." "Because it is. Welcome to the business of survival." He took a sip. studied her over the rim of his glass. You think I'm a bad person. I think you're complicated. That surprised a laugh out of him. Diplomatic. Marcus said you were smart. Marcus says a lot of things. He does, and 90% of it is worth listening to. DeLuca set down his glass. The Thursday shipment. I've decided we're going to intercept it. Lena's stomach dropped. Isn't that exactly what Volkov would expect? If he's planning something, he's planning something. The question is whether he's planning for me specifically or if I'm convenient collateral damage. DeLuca pulled up a map on his tablet, the harbor district rendered in clean lines and marked zones. Volkov's facility is here, North Dock. The shipment's coming in on a vessel called the Mariana, scheduled to arrive at 11 p.m. Thursday. Extra security means he's worried about theft or interception. So walking into that is suicide. Walking into it alone would be, which is why we're not going to be alone and we're not going to be obvious about it. He zoomed in on the map. You're going to be my eyes on the inside. Inside where? Volkov's operation. As of tomorrow, you're going to apply for a job at a shipping company. Temporary administrative work, filing, data entry, whatever gets you in the building. Lena stared at him. You want me to get a job with the man who might be trying to kill you? I want you to be invisible in a place where everyone else is visible. Volkov knows my security team. He'd spot Marcus or any of my regular people immediately. But you? DeLuca smiled. You're a waitress looking for better pay. Completely ordinary. Forgettable. What if he recognizes me from the dinner? He won't. You were furniture that night, part of the background. That's your gift, Lena. You exist without existing. He pulled up a file on his tablet, slid it across the desk. Rita's already created your employment history. 2 years at a logistics firm in Chicago, laid off due to downsizing, strong administrative skills, good references that we control. You interview tomorrow at 2 p.m. The file looked real. Complete work history, references, even a LinkedIn profile with a photo that was definitely Lena, but somehow looked different, more corporate, more forgettable. And if I get the job? Then you go to work. You watch. You listen. You tell me everything that doesn't fit. DeLuca's expression turned serious. This is dangerous, understand that. If Volkov or his people suspect you're working for me, they won't ask polite questions. But I think the risk is manageable, and the intelligence you could gather is worth it. You think or you know? I think. I'm not going to lie to you about the odds. Lena looked at the fake employment history, at the person she was supposed to become. Part of her wanted to refuse, to say this was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But another part, the part that had spent 6 years invisible and was just starting to feel like she mattered, wanted to prove she could do this. If I'm going inside, she said slowly, I'll need to know more about Volkov's operation. Who works for him? What the hierarchy looks like? What normal looks like so I can spot abnormal? DeLuca's smile widened. Marcus was right about you. You're a natural. The next morning, Marcus drove Lena to a storage unit on the east side where DeLuca kept what he called his research archive. Filing cabinets full of information on everyone who mattered in Harborview's underground economy. Volkov, Anton, born in Moscow, came to the States in '97. Marcus pulled out a thick folder, dropped it on the folding table. Started as dock labor, worked his way up. Smart, patient, ruthless when he needs to be. Controls about 40% of the North Harbor shipping operations. Lena flipped through the file. Photos of Volkov at various events, always surrounded by serious-looking men in expensive suits. Financial records that showed a legitimate business with revenue streams that didn't quite add up. Associates, employees. A family tree that included a wife and 2 kids in private school. His second in command is a man named Sergei Kozlov, Marcus continued, pulling up a photo on his phone. Former Russian military, probably intelligence. Came over with Volkov, handles security and enforcement. Dangerous guy, very good at his job. The photo showed a man in his 50s, trim and cold-eyed, the kind of face that promised nothing good. And the assistant from the dinner? Lena asked. Anya Petrova. Background's murky, but we think former FSB. She's been with Volkov for 3 years, handles sensitive communications and coordination. Marcus pulled up another photo. If anyone's going to spot you, it's her, so you stay invisible. No eye contact, no standing out, nothing that registers as unusual. Lena spent the rest of the morning memorizing faces, names, organizational structure. By the time Marcus drove her to the interview, she could recite Volkov's key people from memory. The shipping company operated out of a converted warehouse that tried to look legitimate with fresh paint and a reception area that featured motivational posters about teamwork. The woman who interviewed Lena was tired, overworked, and barely glanced at her resume. You type? 60 words per minute? No Excel? Yes. When can you start? Immediately. The woman, her nameplate said Jennifer, sighed like this was one less problem on a very long list. Fine. 30 hours a week, 15 an hour, you'll be doing data entry and filing. Dress code is business casual, no jeans, show up Monday at 8. Thank you, Lena said, channeling every ounce of grateful but desperate she could manage. I really appreciate the opportunity. Jennifer was already looking at her computer screen. Sure. Stop by HR on your way out for the paperwork. That easy. Lena was in. She texted DeLuca from the parking lot. Got the job. Start Monday. His response came back almost immediately. Well done. Marcus will brief you on what to look for. Be careful. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus ran her through scenarios. How to avoid security cameras, where to position herself to overhear conversations, what kind of questions would seem normal versus suspicious. Rita provided her with a burner phone that looked like a regular smartphone but routed everything through encrypted channels. Take photos of anything interesting, Rita said, showing her how the camera function worked. Documents, shipping manifests, anything with numbers or dates. Don't be obvious about it, but get what you can. What counts as interesting? Anything that doesn't match the public-facing business. Volkov runs a legitimate shipping operation, but there's a shadow infrastructure underneath. Shipments that don't appear in official logs, payments to shell companies, meetings that aren't on the calendar. That's what you're hunting. Sunday night, Lena lay awake in her apartment, still strange to think of it as hers, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd walk into enemy territory and pretend to be someone she wasn't. The training had prepared her mechanically, but the fear was something else entirely. Her phone buzzed. DeLuca, you'll do fine. Trust your instincts. She wanted to ask how he could be so sure, how he knew she wouldn't freeze or make a mistake that got her killed. But maybe that was the point. He didn't know. He was betting on her anyway. Lena showed up at Volkov's shipping company at 7:50 Monday morning, wearing clothes from Target and carrying a lunch she'd packed herself. Maximum ordinary. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Cubicles in various states of organization, fluorescent lights that hummed, the smell of burnt coffee and someone's perfume. Jennifer pointed her to a desk in the back corner, handed her a stack of shipping manifests, and told her to enter the data into the system. Everything on these forms goes into the database, Jennifer explained without enthusiasm. Container numbers, weights, destinations, dates. It's boring but necessary. Questions? No, I think I've got it. Great. Try not to screw it up. Lena settled into the rhythm of data entry, her fingers moving automatically while her brain cataloged everything else. The office had 12 people working various shifts. Most ignored her completely, focused on their own tasks. A few offered polite nods. No one cared who she was. Perfect. By lunch, she'd identified the patterns. Most employees handled legitimate shipping operations, tracking containers, coordinating with trucking companies, processing customs paperwork. But there was a separate group, 4 people who worked in offices with closed doors and didn't interact much with the general staff. One of them was Anya Petrova. Lena spotted her around 10:30, walking through the office with a folder tucked under her arm. She moved with the same controlled efficiency Lena remembered from the restaurant, her attention sweeping across the room in a way that seemed casual but wasn't. Their eyes met for half a second. Lena looked away immediately, returning to her data entry like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Had Anya recognized her? Remembered her from the dinner? The moment passed. Anya continued to wherever she was going, and Lena forced herself to breathe normally. Over the next week, Lena built a mental map of the operation. The legitimate business ran through the main office, everything documented and above board. But the closed-door offices, that's where the interesting things happened. Anya and two other men, one of them Sergei Kozlov, handled shipments that never appeared on the public manifest system. On Wednesday, Lena volunteered to stay late to catch up on filing. Jennifer looked relieved rather than suspicious. Just lock up when you're done. Security's already been through. Alone in the office, Lena moved quickly. She'd learned the camera locations, knew where the blind spots were. The filing cabinets in the back office weren't locked. Why would they be in a secure facility with only trusted employees? She pulled out her phone, started photographing documents. Shipping manifests for containers that had arrived weeks ago but weren't in the main database. Payment records to companies with names like Baltic Consulting and Northern Distribution Services. Dates that aligned with unusual activity patterns Marcus had mentioned. And then she found it. A single page. Handwritten notes in what looked like Russian, but the numbers were universal. Container identification, arrival date, Thursday, 11 p.m. And a list of items that made Lena's blood run cold even without speaking the language. Weapons specifications, quantities, prices. She photographed it, hands shaking slightly, then carefully replaced everything exactly as she'd found it. Outside, a car door slammed. Lena froze. The parking lot should be empty. Everyone had left hours ago. Voices getting closer, male, speaking Russian. She shoved the filing cabinet closed as quietly as possible, killed the phone's camera light, and moved. The office had a back exit that led to the loading area, used during the day for deliveries. Lena slipped through it just as she heard the front door opening. In the loading area, she pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. Through the window, she could see shapes moving in the office. Two men, one of them definitely Sergei, checking something. Had they seen her? Did they know someone had been in the files? The men spent 5 minutes inside, then left. Lena waited another 10, counting seconds, before she moved. She was 3 blocks away before she allowed herself to shake. DeLuca's office was lit when Lena arrived at midnight. Marcus let her in, took one look at her face, and poured her whiskey without asking. "Tell me you got something worth almost getting caught," he said. Lena pulled out her phone, showed him the photos. Marcus studied them, his expression darkening. "Yeah, that's worth it. Boss needs to see this now." DeLuca was on a call when they entered, but he ended it immediately when he saw Lena's face. What happened? She told him everything, the filing cabinets, the documents, the near miss with Sergei. DeLuca listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he held out his hand for her phone, scrolled through the photos slowly, stopping on the handwritten manifest. "Well," he said finally, "that's confirmation." "Confirmation of what?" Lena asked. "That Volkov's bringing in enough weapons to start a small war, and he's doing it without clearing it with anyone." DeLuca's jaw tightened, which means either he's monumentally arrogant or he's planning to use them against his competition, possibly both. "Competition meaning you," Marcus said, "among others. But yes, I'd be the primary target." DeLuca set down the phone, looked at Lena. "You did good work. Dangerous work, but good. Now comes the hard part." "What's the hard part?" "Thursday's 3 days away. We need to know exactly what's on that ship, where it's going after it's unloaded, and who Volkov's planning to arm with it, which means you need to go back in." Lena's stomach twisted. "They almost caught me tonight." "I know, and I wouldn't ask if there was another option. But you're inside, you have access, and we're running out of time." DeLuca's expression softened fractionally. "I can pull you out if you want. Find another way. It's your choice." It was, Lena realized, the first time anyone had given her a real choice in weeks. Not a forced decision between bad options, but actual autonomy. She thought about the weapons specs she'd photographed, about what someone could do with that kind of firepower in a city like Harborview, about the people who'd get caught in whatever war Volkov was planning. "What exactly do you need me to find out?" she asked. Over the next hour, DeLuca and Marcus laid out what they knew and what they needed. The shipment was confirmed for Thursday night. What they didn't know was where the weapons would go afterward, who was buying them, or how Volkov planned to distribute them without drawing federal attention. "There'll be another manifest," DeLuca said. "Something that shows the transfer chain. Could be physical, could be digital, but it'll exist somewhere, probably in Anya's office or Sergei's." "Those offices are locked," Lena said. "I checked. Can you get a photo of the lock? She could. She did, the next day during her lunch break, pretending to be lost looking for the bathroom. Rita examined the photo that night and pronounced it pickable with the right tools. I can make you a bump key, she said. It's not subtle, but it'll work. You'll have maybe 3 minutes inside before someone notices the door's been opened. 3 minutes isn't much time. Then you better know exactly what you're looking for. Thursday morning arrived too fast. Lena went through her normal routine, shower, coffee, the same boring business casual she'd worn all week. But her hand shook when she buttoned her shirt. The bump key was taped inside her bra, small and cold against her skin. The phone was fully charged. She'd memorized the office layout, the camera blind spots, the timing of security rounds. Everything that could be prepared was prepared. She still felt like she was walking toward a cliff edge. Work proceeded normally until lunch. Jennifer left to meet her sister. Most of the office cleared out. Anya and Sergei were in a meeting in Volkov's private conference room. Lena had checked the calendar that morning. She had a window, maybe 20 minutes. The bump key worked on the third try. Lena slipped into Anya's office, closing the door behind her as softly as possible. The space was obsessively organized. No personal photos, no clutter, everything filed and labeled with military precision. Lena started with the desk drawers, photographing everything that looked relevant. Shipping schedules, contact lists, payment records. In the bottom drawer, she found a tablet. It was locked, but the password was written on a sticky note underneath it. Sloppy security that seemed completely out of character for Anya. Lena powered it on, heart racing. The tablet contained everything. Detailed manifests for the Thursday shipment, including final destinations, names of buyers, most of them shell companies, but a few Lena recognized from DeLuca's briefings. Transfer protocols, payment schedules, even contingency plans if the shipment was intercepted. She photographed it all, screen after screen, working as fast as her shaking hands allowed. A door slammed somewhere in the building. Lena's head snapped up. Voices in the hallway, getting closer. One of them was Anya. Told Volkov this was premature, Anya was saying in accented English. We should have waited until next month. The buyer set the timeline. Sergei's voice, flat and certain. We deliver Thursday or lose the contract. They were heading toward the office. Lena powered down the tablet, shoved it back in the drawer, and looked frantically for an exit. The office had one door, the one she'd come through, and a window that overlooked a 3-story drop to the parking lot. The voices were right outside. She did the only thing she could think of, dove under the desk and pulled the chair in as close as possible, making herself as small as she could. The door opened. Don't trust his timeline, Anya was saying. She moved to her desk, close enough that Lena could see her shoes. Expensive heels, immaculate despite the warehouse environment. If DeLuca suspects anything, DeLuca is meeting with the Port Authority Thursday afternoon, Sergei interrupted. Vincent confirmed it this morning. He'll be nowhere near the docks. Lena's brain stuttered. Vincent. DeLuca's logistics guy. The one she'd watched taking secretive phone calls. You're certain Vincent's information is reliable? Anya asked. He's motivated. DeLuca's been cutting him out of major decisions for months. Vincent sees an opportunity to advance, and we're providing it. So that was the leak. Vincent was feeding information to Volkov, probably in exchange for a position in whatever organization emerged after DeLuca was eliminated. Under the desk, Lena's phone buzzed. The sound was barely audible, muffled by her pocket, but in the silent office it might as well have been a gunshot. Anya went still. Did you hear that? Hear what? A phone, I heard. Anya moved around the desk. Lena closed her eyes, pressed herself flatter against the desk's underside, and prayed to nothing in particular that invisibility was more than a metaphor. Anya's heels clicked closer, stopped. Probably the cleaning crew, Sergei said from the doorway. They're always leaving their phones in random places. A pause that felt like eternity. Perhaps, Anya said finally. Still, after Thursday, we'll need to review security protocols. Too many people have access to this building. After Thursday, it won't matter. DeLuca will be too busy dealing with federal attention to worry about us. They left, still talking, and Lena remained frozen under the desk for another 5 minutes before she dared to move. Her entire body ached from tension. Her phone, a text from Marcus checking in, felt like a bomb in her pocket. She had what she needed, more than needed. Evidence of Vincent's betrayal, details of Thursday's operation, proof that Volkov was planning to use the weapons shipment to draw federal investigation onto DeLuca. Now she just had to get out without anyone noticing she'd been there. The rest of the day crawled. Lena returned to her desk, forced herself to continue data entry like nothing had happened, while her brain screamed at her to run. Every time someone walked past her cubicle, she tensed. Every unexpected sound made her jump. At 5 p.m., she clocked out with everyone else and walked to her car with her shoulders rigid, expecting someone to call her name, to stop her, to reveal that they'd known all along. But nobody did. She made it 3 blocks before pulling over and vomiting into a storm drain. DeLuca's office that night felt like command central for a military operation. Maps covered every surface. Marcus had brought in 2 other security people Lena didn't recognize. Rita was running financial analyses on her laptop, tracking money movements that might indicate Volkov's next moves. Lena handed over her phone, then collapsed into a chair while DeLuca scrolled through the photos. The silence stretched. "Vincent," DeLuca said finally. The word came out quiet, almost sad. "I gave him opportunities. Promotions. I trusted him." "Greed makes people stupid," Marcus said without sympathy. "How do you want to handle it?" "Carefully. If we move on Vincent now, Volkov knows we're onto him. Better to feed Vincent false information and see where it goes." DeLuca looked at Lena. "This is remarkable work. You got everything we needed and then some." "They almost caught me." "But they didn't. That's what matters." He pulled up one of the photos, the manifest with final destinations. "This confirms what I suspected. Volkov's not just bringing in weapons. He's orchestrating a false flag operation. The manifest showed deliveries to addresses we know are connected to my distribution network, but I never authorized any of it." "So when the shipment gets traced," Rita began, "it leads back to me. Federal investigation, asset seizure, possibly RICO charges. Volkov eliminates his primary competition without firing a shot." DeLuca's expression hardened. "Clever. Risky, but clever." "So what do we do?" Lena asked. DeLuca smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "We let him think it's working, and then we turn his own operation against him." The plan DeLuca laid out over the next 2 hours was complicated enough to make Lena's head spin, but the core was simple. Let Volkov think everything was proceeding according to his design, then rip the foundation out from under him at the last possible moment. "Vincent's been feeding them my schedule," DeLuca said, pulling up a calendar on his tablet. "So we give him a schedule to feed. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the Port Authority, completely legitimate, been planned for weeks. Vincent will confirm I'll be there from 2 to 5 p.m., nowhere near the docks when the Mariana arrives." "Except you won't actually be at that meeting," Marcus said. "I'll be there long enough to sign in, be seen, establish presence. Then a convenient emergency pulls me away. Port Authority will confirm I was there if anyone asks, but I'll have mobility when it matters." Rita looked up from her laptop. "The weapons shipment arrives at 11 p.m. at Volkov's North Dock facility. According to Lena's photos, it's scheduled to transfer to 3 different trucks by midnight, heading to the addresses that'll implicate you." "So we intercept the trucks," Lena said. "No," DeLuca's voice was firm. "We intercept the information. Volkov's counting on federal agencies tracing those weapons back to my network. But what if the documentation tells a different story?" "You want to alter the manifests," Rita said slowly. "Make it look like the weapons were always meant for Volkov's organization." "Exactly. The physical shipment still moves. We're not stealing anything, not giving the feds reason to investigate us. But the paper trail, the digital records, all of it points back to Volkov instead of me." Marcus frowned. "That requires access to their systems, plural, shipping databases, customs records, financial documentation. Even with Lena's photos, we'd need someone inside with admin privileges." "We have someone inside," DeLuca said, looking at Lena. Her stomach dropped. "I'm data entry. I don't have admin access to anything." "Not yet. But you've been there a week, you're reliable, and Jennifer is drowning in work. What if she needed help with something that required elevated access?" "You want me to social engineer my way into their system." "I want you to be helpful," DeLuca corrected. Offer to take on extra responsibilities. Stay late. Make yourself indispensable. Jennifer will give you access because it makes her life easier, and she has no reason to suspect you're anything other than what you appear to be. Lena thought about Anya's cold assessment, about hiding under the desk while people discuss betrayal and murder. They're suspicious. After Thursday, Anya said they'd review security protocols. After Thursday, which gives us 3 days to move. DeLuca's expression softened slightly. I know what I'm asking. If you want out, say so now. But we're running out of time and options, and you're the only person who can do this. The weight of it settled on Lena's shoulders like physical pressure. She'd gone from serving coffee to corporate espionage in less than a month, and the smart play would be to walk away, take DeLuca's money, disappear to somewhere that didn't have people like Volkov and Anya and guns hidden in desk drawers. But she thought about Vincent, about how casually he'd sold out someone who'd trusted him, about Volkov bringing weapons into the city that would end up in the hands of people who'd used them, about the invisible chain of violence that happened when people like her looked away. Tell me exactly what you need me to do, she said. By the time Lena left DeLuca's office at 3 a.m., she had a plan that felt equal parts brilliant and insane. Rita had walked her through the technical requirements, what system access she'd need, how to identify the right databases, how to deploy the software that would rewrite the digital trail without leaving forensic evidence. The key is to make minimal changes, Rita had explained. We're not inventing new shipments or creating false records. We're just redirecting the ones that exist, changing destination codes, altering recipient information, adjusting the documentation so it reflects reality instead of Volkov's fiction. And if their IT department notices? They won't have time. We make the changes Thursday afternoon, the shipment arrives that night, and by the time anyone thinks to audit the system, the physical evidence will match the digital records. Case closed. Marcus drove Lena home, neither of them speaking much. She was too tired, too wired, her brain still processing everything that could go wrong. You did good work, Marcus said as he pulled up to her building. Better than most people I've seen in this business. I'm terrified 90% of the time. That's how you know you're smart. People who aren't scared are usually dead. He shifted in his seat to look at her directly. DeLuca doesn't say it enough, but he values what you bring. The way you see things, notice patterns. That's rare. Is it worth dying for? Marcus considered that. Depends on what you think your life's worth. You were invisible before this, right? Safe but small. Maybe that was enough. But if you pull this off, if you help stop whatever Volkov's planning, you'll have done something that matters. That changes things. Lena wanted to ask if it had changed things for him, if whatever he'd done before working for DeLuca had been worth the scars and the hypervigilance and the kind of life where you expected people to try killing your boss in public. But she was too tired for philosophy. Get some sleep, Marcus said. Tomorrow starts the hard part. Wednesday morning, Lena showed up at Volkov's office with coffee for Jennifer and a smile that felt like wearing someone else's face. You're a lifesaver, Jennifer said, accepting the cup gratefully. I've been here since 6 dealing with a shipping crisis. Half the manifest data from last week is missing, and corporate's demanding a full audit by Friday. Lena saw the opening and took it. I could help with that. I'm pretty good with databases, and I'm caught up on my regular work. Jennifer looked at her like she'd offered to donate a kidney. Seriously? I don't mind staying late. The extra hours would be nice, actually. Okay, yes, thank you. Jennifer pulled up a screen on her computer. I'll get you temporary admin access for the shipping database. Just pull everything from the past 2 weeks and cross-reference it with the physical cargo manifests. Flag anything that doesn't match. It was almost too easy. By lunch, Lena had admin credentials and legitimate reason to be deep in the system, examining records that would normally be restricted. She worked carefully, methodically, doing the actual job Jennifer had assigned while mapping out the architecture for what would come next. The system was well-designed but not impenetrable. Financial records connected to shipping databases through a series of linked tables. Alter one record and you could cascade changes through the whole network if you knew what you were doing. Rita had given her a small USB drive disguised as a regular thumb drive. Plug it in, run the program, and it would install a backdoor that would allow remote access later. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Lena waited until Jennifer left for a dentist appointment at 2, until the office had that mid-afternoon lull when people were focused on their own work. Then she plugged in the drive. The program ran silently, a progress bar creeping across her screen behind a spreadsheet that looked completely normal to anyone glancing over. 30 seconds. 45. What are you working on? Lena's heart stopped. She turned to find Anya standing behind her, close enough to see the screen if she looked. Audit work, Lena said, forcing her voice steady. Jennifer asked me to cross-reference last week's shipping data. Thorough of you. Anya's eyes swept across Lena's desk, taking in the coffee cup, the scattered papers, the completely ordinary appearance of someone doing boring data entry. You're the new girl, Lisa? Lena. Lena, how are you finding the work? It's fine, pays the bills. Anya smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. Indeed. Well, don't let me interrupt. She walked away, and Lena forced herself to breathe normally, to not watch Anya go, to keep her eyes on the screen where the progress bar had reached 97%. 100%. Program complete. Lena ejected the drive, slipped it into her pocket, and allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of relief before returning to actual work. Her hands were shaking badly enough that she had to clasp them together under the desk. That evening, back at DeLuca's office, Rita examined the logs from the backdoor program and pronounced it successful. We're in. I can access their system remotely, make the changes we need without anyone physically being at a terminal. Rita pulled up a command prompt that meant nothing to Lena but apparently satisfied her. Thursday afternoon, probably around 4 p.m., I'll execute. By the time the Mariana docks, every piece of documentation will tell the story we want told. What about backups? Marcus asked. They'll have system backups, offline archives, which is why we're not deleting anything. We're correcting errors. If they restore from backup, they'll find the same information because we're going to alter the backups too. It's elegant, really. We're not hiding evidence, we're changing what the evidence says. DeLuca listened to this with the focus of someone planning a military operation. And the physical shipment? Proceeds normally. Volkov's people unload the Mariana, transfer weapons to the 3 trucks, send them to the destination specified in the manifest. Except now those destinations aren't addresses connected to your network, they're Volkov's own warehouses. He'll notice when the trucks arrive at the wrong locations. By then it won't matter. The documentation will be locked in. If Volkov tries to claim the shipment was meant for someone else, the evidence says otherwise. Even his own records will contradict him. Marcus looked skeptical. This assumes he doesn't have additional documentation we don't know about. Paper records, separate systems, insurance? He might, DeLuca conceded, but the digital trail is what federal investigators will follow. Customs records, shipping databases, financial transactions. All of that will point to Volkov running an illegal weapons operation, his word against the evidence. What about Vincent? Lena asked. He'll know something went wrong when you don't end up under investigation. Vincent's going to have his own problems. DeLuca's expression was cold. I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning. I'm going to tell him I'm concerned about security leaks, that I'm implementing new protocols. He'll report this to Volkov, naturally, which will make them more cautious but won't change their timeline for Thursday. Then, after everything goes down, Vincent's going to discover that all those payments he's been receiving from Volkov's shell companies are now part of a federal evidence file. You're framing him. I'm letting him face consequences for his choices. There's a difference. Lena thought there probably wasn't, but she'd learned when to argue with DeLuca and when to stay quiet. Thursday arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything feel unreal. Lena went through her morning routine on autopilot, shower, coffee, the same business casual that had become her uniform, but her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. When had she become someone who planted surveillance software and helped orchestrate counter-betrayals? When had the line between observer and participant blurred so completely that she couldn't see it anymore? Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Remember, act normal. Today is just another day. Except it wasn't. Today was the day everything either worked or fell apart spectacularly. At Volkov's office, the energy was different, subtle, but Lena had learned to read these things. People moved with more purpose. Conversations happened in lowered voices. Anya was nowhere to be seen, which probably meant she was at the docks overseeing preparations. Jennifer was stressed about the audit deadline, barely acknowledging Lena's arrival. Perfect. Lena settled into her cubicle and worked on actual data entry while watching the clock. 2 p.m. DeLuca would be arriving at his Port Authority meeting, establishing his alibi. 3 p.m. While Rita would begin the first phase of system alterations, changing backup records. 4 p.m. The main changes, rewriting the current databases to reflect new destinations. 4:30 p.m. DeLuca would leave the Port Authority meeting due to an emergency. 6 p.m. System changes would be locked in, backups overwritten with the new data. 11 p.m. The Mariana would dock and the weapons would transfer to trucks that would drive themselves straight into federal evidence. Lena had her part memorized. She was supposed to be visible and ordinary all day, establishing that she was just an employee doing her job. Then leave at her normal time, go home, stay there until she heard from Marcus. Simple. Safe. At 3:15, Sergei walked through the office. He moved slowly, scanning faces, and Lena felt his attention settle on her for a moment before continuing. Her skin crawled, but she kept her eyes on her screen, typing data that didn't need typing. 3:30. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rita. Phase 1 complete, so far so good. 4 p.m. Another text. Beginning Phase 2, stay calm. Lena was calm, terrifyingly calm. The kind of calm that felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the wind was coming. At 4:20, Jennifer's phone rang. Lena couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched Jennifer's face go pale, watched her hands start shaking. Yes, sir, I understand. Right away. Jennifer hung up and stood, moving fast enough that her chair rolled backward. Everyone listen up. We're implementing emergency security protocols. Nobody leaves the building until further notice. IT is running a system audit, and we need all employees to remain at their stations. The office erupted in confused murmurs. Someone asked why, but Jennifer shook her head. Just company policy. Shouldn't take more than an hour. Lena's stomach turned to ice. This wasn't in the plan. Nobody had anticipated a lockdown. She pulled out her phone under her desk, texted Marcus. Building lockdown. They're running a system audit. His response came back fast. Do not let them access your computer. Shut it down if you have to. Rita's working on covering tracks but needs more time. Shutting down her computer would look suspicious as hell. Everyone else was still working, still at their terminals. But if it ran a diagnostic and found the backdoor software, if they traced it back to her workstation. Lena made a decision. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the bathroom. Miss! Sergei appeared from nowhere, blocking her path. You heard the announcement. Please return to your desk. I need to use the bathroom. After the audit. I can't wait an hour. Lena made her voice apologetic, embarrassed. It's a female thing, please. Sergei's expression suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Fine. 2 minutes. In the bathroom, Lena locked herself in a stall and called Rita. I don't have time for updates, Rita said immediately. I'm trying to... They've locked down the building. They're running a system audit. If they find the back door... Rita swore, creative and multilingual. How long do you have? I don't know. Jennifer said an hour, but I can scrub the most obvious traces in 10 minutes. After that, if they're looking hard enough, they'll find something. The question is whether they're looking hard enough. What do I do? Act normal. Bored. Like this is an annoying inconvenience. If you panic, you're done. The call ended. Lena flushed the toilet for authenticity, washed her hands, checked her reflection. The woman staring back looked terrified. She forced her expression neutral and returned to her desk. The next 40 minutes were the longest of Lena's life. She sat at her computer pretending to work while IT technicians moved through the office with laptops and serious expressions. They checked workstations randomly, asking questions, examining logs. When one of them approached Lena's desk, she looked up with mild curiosity. Need something? Just checking your system. Won't take long. The technician, young, tired-looking, plugged a device into her computer and ran some kind of diagnostic. His screen filled with code that meant nothing to Lena but might mean everything to him. She held her breath. The technician frowned, ran another check, then unplugged his device. You're good. Thanks for your patience. He moved to the next desk, and Lena's hands were shaking so badly she had to sit on them. 5 p.m. The audit concluded with no announcements, no drama. Jennifer released everyone with apologies about the inconvenience and vague statements about updated security measures. Lena walked to her car with measured steps, expecting someone to call her back to reveal that they knew that this had all been a test. But nobody did. She made it to her car, started the engine, and drove 3 blocks before pulling over and calling Marcus. "I'm out. What happened?" Rita managed to scrub most of the tracks. They found evidence someone accessed the system remotely, but it looked like a routine vulnerability scan, nothing unusual. Volkov's people are paranoid but not specific. He paused. Phase 2 completed successfully. All the digital records now point exactly where we need them to. So, we're good? So far. Now comes the part where we see if Volkov takes the bait. DeLuca's office that evening felt like a war room. Multiple screens showed different feeds, traffic cameras near the docks, financial tracking systems, secure communication channels to people Marcus wouldn't name. The Mariana cleared customs at 9 p.m., Marcus reported, watching one of the screens. Currently moving to dock position at Volkov's facility, ETA 1105. Volkov's people are in place? DeLuca asked. Full security team. Sergey's running the operation personally. 3 trucks waiting for transfer, drivers pre-screened. Everything proceeding according to their plan. Which is now our plan, Rita added, not looking up from her laptop. I've confirmed all documentation updates are locked in. Even if they tried to restore from backup, they'd get the same information. Lena sat in the corner, feeling useless and overwhelmed. Her part was done. Now she could only watch. At 11:09, the Mariana docked. The feed from a traffic camera 3 blocks away showed distant activity, trucks moving, people working efficiently in the harsh glow of dock lights. It looked professional, practiced, completely routine. Transfers beginning, Marcus said. First trucks loading now. DeLuca watched with the intensity of someone waiting for a specific moment. Vincent reported my Port Authority meeting to Volkov this afternoon. As far as they know, I have no idea what's happening tonight. Where are you really? Lena asked. About 4 blocks from where Volkov thinks I am. Close enough to respond if something goes wrong, far enough to maintain deniability. He checked his watch. The trucks will head to their destinations based on the manifest data, which now sends them to warehouses Volkov controls instead of ones connected to my network. What happens when his people realize the trucks arrived at the wrong place? They'll try to reroute, but by then, federal agents will have received an anonymous tip about illegal weapons moving through the harbor. They'll trace the shipment, find it at Volkov's warehouses, and discover documentation showing he's been running this operation for months. It was elegant in a brutal sort of way. Volkov had built the trap for DeLuca and was now walking into it himself. First truck's departing, Marcus announced. On the screen, a semi pulled away from the dock, heading toward the highway. 2 more followed at measured intervals. Now we wait, DeLuca said. The waiting was worse than the action. Lena drank coffee that tasted like battery acid and watched screens that showed nothing dramatic. Just trucks moving through traffic, taking routes that appeared on GPS, tracking as simple delivery runs. At 12:40 a.m., Marcus's phone rang. He listened for 30 seconds, then hung up. First truck arrived at Warehouse 7, Volkov's facility on the east side. Driver's confused because the manifest says west side, but the system shows east. He's calling for instructions. Let me guess, DeLuca said. The instructions he receives will tell him there was a clerical error. Proceed with unloading. Already happening. Volkov's people are scrambling, trying to figure out what went wrong, but the documentation is ironclad. As far as any official record shows, this shipment was always meant for their warehouses. Second truck, third truck, all arriving at locations owned or controlled by Volkov's organization, all with confused drivers who were told to proceed anyway. At 1:15 a.m., DeLuca made a phone call to a number he didn't identify. The shipment I mentioned, he said to whoever answered. It arrived tonight at the locations I specified. You'll want to move quickly before they realize what's happened. He hung up. Federal agents? Lena asked. Someone with federal connections who benefits from taking down weapons trafficking operations. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that in approximately 3 hours, Volkov's warehouses will be raided, the weapons will be seized, and every piece of documentation will show him as the operator. He'll know it was you. He'll suspect, but suspicion isn't proof, and he'll be too busy dealing with federal investigations to do much about it. DeLuca's expression was satisfied, cold. He tried to frame me. Instead, he's framed himself. The first news reports came in at 4:30 a.m. Major weapons bust at multiple locations, federal agents seizing enough firepower to supply a small army, arrests pending. No names yet, but the locations matched Volkov's warehouses exactly. By 6 a.m., when Lena finally went home, the story was everywhere. Local news, federal press releases, social media speculation. The biggest weapons seizure in Harborview history, part of an ongoing investigation into illegal arms trafficking through the harbor. Volkov's name hadn't been released yet, but it would be. The documentation was too thorough, too complete. He'd built the evidence against himself with his own operation. Lena slept for 4 hours and woke to her phone ringing. Unknown number. "Miss Brooks?" DeLuca's voice, warm with something that might have been pride. "You should watch the news." She turned on her TV to see federal agents leading Anton Volkov out of his office in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The bear-like presence reduced to just a man in an expensive suit facing charges that would probably end with decades in prison. "Is it over?" Lena asked. "The immediate threat is neutralized. Volkov's organization will collapse without him. His people will scramble for position or flee. Some will reach out to me looking for employment, which I'll consider carefully. The weapons are off the street. The city's safer, at least temporarily." "What about Vincent?" "Vincent's currently in conversation with federal prosecutors about his financial dealings with Volkov's shell companies. I imagine he'll be quite cooperative once he realizes the alternative is sharing a cell block with people he helped betray." Lena should have felt victorious. They'd won, hadn't they? Stopped a dangerous man from doing dangerous things, prevented weapons from flooding the city, protected DeLuca's organization from a coordinated attack. Instead, she felt hollow. "Are you there?" DeLuca asked. "Yeah, just processing." "It's a lot to process. You went from waitressing to corporate espionage in less than a month. That's not a small adjustment." He paused. "Take a few days off. Rest. Think about whether you want to continue this kind of work, or if you'd prefer something different. The offer stands either way." "Different how?" "Rita could use help with financial analysis. Marcus is always looking for people with your observational skills for lower-risk security work. Or if you want to go back to something normal, I can arrange that too. You've more than earned the choice." After he hung up, Lena sat in her expensive apartment with its working appliances and reinforced windows and thought about choices. She'd spent 6 years invisible, safe, in her smallness. Then she'd warned a stranger, and everything changed. Now she could see patterns everywhere, in how people moved, how information flowed, in the hidden architecture of power and violence that ran beneath the city's surface. The question was whether she wanted to keep seeing. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Additional arrests in the weapons trafficking case, names being released. She scrolled through them, recognizing some from her time inside Volkov's operation. Sergei Kozlov, Anya Petrova, others whose faces she'd memorized. They'd all made choices too, and now they'd face consequences. Lena made coffee, opened her laptop, and started writing down everything she'd observed over the past month. Not for DeLuca or the feds or anyone else, for herself, to make sense of what she'd become. Somewhere around page 3, she realized she wasn't writing a resignation letter. She was writing a report. The report took Lena 3 days to complete. She documented everything she'd noticed during the Volkov operation, patterns she'd seen, mistakes that had almost gotten her caught, observations about how information moved through criminal organizations, things Marcus hadn't taught her because you couldn't teach them. You had to live them. When she finished, she sent it to DeLuca without a cover note. Either he'd understand what it meant or he wouldn't. His response came an hour later. "My office. Tonight." Lena arrived at 7 to find Marcus already there, reading her report on a tablet. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression had shifted. Not quite respect. She'd earned that already, but recognition. Like he was seeing someone who'd crossed a threshold he remembered crossing himself. "This is good work," he said simply. "Professional level. I just wrote down what I saw. That's the skill. Most people see without seeing. You catalog, analyze, make connections." He handed the tablet to DeLuca, who'd been reading over his shoulder. "She's got instincts you can't train." DeLuca scrolled through the document again, stopping on a section where Lena had outlined how Volkov's security had almost caught her and what she'd learned from it. "You flagged something here I missed," he said, "about Anya checking her watch before leaving the restaurant that night. You thought it meant she was timing something. She checked it twice in 3 minutes. People don't do that unless they're waiting for a specific window. Which means the dinner meeting had a time component we didn't account for. If we'd accepted Volkov's invitation for Thursday, we'd have walked into something coordinated down to the minute." DeLuca set down the tablet. That kind of observation saves lives. Lena felt heat creep up her neck. Praise from DeLuca was rare enough to be uncomfortable. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Volkov's arrested, his operations collapsed. Do I just wait for the next crisis? That depends on what you want. I told you to take time, think about whether you want to continue this work. Have you?" She had. 3 days of sleeping poorly and replaying every moment when things could have gone catastrophically wrong. 3 days of reading news coverage about the weapons bust and thinking about what would have happened if they'd failed. 3 days of being alone in her apartment, feeling like she was waiting for her real life to start. "I want to keep working," Lena said, "but I need to understand what that means. The Volkov thing was reactive. Someone came after you. We stopped them. Is that what this job is? Waiting for threats and responding?" DeLuca exchanged a look with Marcus that suggested they'd discussed this already. "Sometimes," DeLuca said, "but there's another component, prevention. Understanding threats before they materialize. That requires intelligence work, the kind you've shown aptitude for. You want me to spy on people. I want you to help me understand the landscape. Harborview's power structure is fluid. Volkov's arrest creates a vacuum. His shipping operations, his territory, his people, they don't just disappear. Someone will move to fill that space, and I need to know who before they become the next problem." Marcus pulled up a map on his tablet, the harbor district divided into color-coded zones. Volkov controlled about 40% of North Harbor shipping. That's gone. His people are scrambling. Some will try to hold territory, some will sell it to the highest bidder, some will flip to federal cooperation to reduce their sentences. The next few weeks will determine who ends up in control. "And you want that to be you," Lena said. "I want it to be someone predictable, someone I can work with or work around. The worst-case scenario is fractured control, 5 or 6 small operators fighting over scraps, destabilizing the entire district." DeLuca zoomed in on the map. "I've already had 3 different groups reach out asking for meetings. Former Volkov people looking for protection, independent operators seeing opportunity, and at least one outside organization testing whether now's the time to move into Harborview. Which one worries you most?" "The outside group, local operators, I understand. We have history, shared interests, rules we generally follow. But outsiders don't know those rules and don't care about stability. They see chaos as opportunity." Lena studied the map, trying to see what DeLuca saw. The color-coded zones showed territory and influence, but beneath that was something else. Relationships, debts, the invisible web of who owed whom and who'd die before betraying which loyalty. "You need someone to go to these meetings and tell you what's real versus what's performance," she said slowly. "Exactly. Marcus can assess security threats, physical dangers, but you can assess intent. Whether someone's negotiating in good faith or buying time, whether they're scared or confident or desperate, that intelligence is worth more than muscle." It made sense. It also meant putting herself in rooms with dangerous people who'd have every reason to see her as a threat if they knew what she was really doing. "How would this work practically?" Lena asked. Rita spoke up from her laptop in the corner. Lena hadn't even noticed her there. "You'd attend meetings as DeLuca's representative or advisor, sometimes openly, sometimes as background. You'd observe, report, help us decide which alliances to pursue and which to avoid. And when someone realizes I'm assessing them, they won't," DeLuca said with certainty. "Because you're not obviously assessing. You're just present, taking notes maybe or handling logistics. People talk around you because they don't register you as a threat." Marcus added, "We'd also have you do preliminary reconnaissance, meet with lower-level people before DeLuca commits to anything significant. You'd pose as someone looking for work, a neutral party facilitating introductions, whatever makes sense for the situation." Lena thought about hiding under Anya's desk, about the weapons manifests and the near misses and the constant low-level terror that had defined the Volkov operation. Then she thought about going back to Sal's diner, to being invisible in a way that meant not mattering. "What's the pay?" she asked. DeLuca named a figure that was double what he'd initially offered. "That's too much. It's appropriate for someone with your skills and the risks involved. You'll also get hazard bonuses for particularly dangerous assignments and full medical coverage, which you should probably use to talk to someone about the stress. This work takes a toll." The practical concern surprised her. "You want me to see a therapist?" "I want you functional long-term. Burnout is real. Trauma accumulates. Rita sees someone twice a month. So does Marcus, though he'll deny it." Marcus didn't deny it, which was answer enough. "Okay," Lena said. "I'm in. What's first?" The first assignment came faster than expected. The outside group that had contacted DeLuca wanted a face-to-face meeting, neutral ground, just preliminary discussions about whether their interests aligned. They called themselves the Coastal Collective, which sounded like a farmers market organization, but apparently controlled significant shipping operations in 3 other port cities. "They're expanding," DeLuca explained during the briefing, "looking for a foothold in Harborview now that Volkov's gone. They've reached out to me, to the Port Authority, and probably to every other operator who might have influence." "What do they want?" Lena asked. "Access, shipping routes, warehouse space, protection from local interference. In exchange, they're offering profit sharing and what they call professional cooperation." Marcus snorted. "Which means they want to use our infrastructure without actually integrating into local power structures. Take profits, avoid responsibilities." "Exactly. But they might be useful if managed correctly, or they might be a problem that grows if we ignore it." DeLuca pulled up photos of 3 people. Their representatives: Catherine Chen, Operations Director; Thomas Vance, Logistics; and someone they're calling a consultant named Adrian Voss. Lena felt something cold slide down her spine at the last name. "Voss? You recognize it?" "No, just unusual name." But she did recognize it, or thought she did. Something about the way it sounded, the syllables that felt wrong in her mouth. She couldn't place why. The photo showed a man in his early 40s, unremarkable features, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. Brown hair, average build, wearing a suit that was expensive without being flashy. But his eyes in the photograph were calculating, predatory, in a way that made Lena's instincts scream. "What's his background?" she asked. "Unclear. No criminal record, no significant digital footprint. He appeared in the collective's organization about 6 months ago, and since then they've been much more aggressive in their expansion." DeLuca studied the photo like he was trying to read something in it. "That concerns me. People who are invisible by choice usually have good reasons." Marcus leaned forward. "I ran background on all 3. Chen and Vance check out. Long histories in legitimate shipping, some connections to gray market operations, but nothing prosecutable. Voss, though, he's a ghost. No employment history before 6 months ago, no social media, nothing. Either he's using an alias or he's been scrubbed." "Witness protection?" Lena suggested. "Possible. Or intelligence community? Someone who needed a new identity, or just someone very good at staying hidden." Marcus pulled up another screen showing what little information existed. "Point is, we don't know what we're dealing with, which makes this meeting higher risk than normal." DeLuca turned to Lena. "You'll attend with me. Official role is junior associate, there to take notes and observe. Actual role is to read Voss specifically. I want to know what he wants, what he's hiding, and whether he's someone we can work with or someone we need to avoid." "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow. Lunch at the Maritime Club, neutral territory, public enough to discourage violence, but private enough for frank discussion." The Maritime Club was the kind of restaurant where Lena had never eaten and probably never would on her own salary. White tablecloths, waiters who moved like they'd been choreographed, prices that weren't listed because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. She wore one of the professional outfits Marcus had helped her select. Charcoal gray suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a way that suggested competence without personality. The goal was to be present without being memorable. DeLuca arrived separately, meeting her in the lobby. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Lena's first car and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who belonged anywhere he decided to be. "Remember, he said quietly while they waited to be seated. You're observing, not participating. Let me handle the conversation. You just watch and note anything that feels off. What if they address me directly? Answer briefly, defer to me for anything substantive. You're junior enough that they shouldn't expect you to have authority. The Coastal Collective's representatives were already seated when the host led them to a private room. Catherine Chen stood to greet them. Mid-30s, sharp suit, handshake like she was making a point. Thomas Vance nodded from his seat, older and tired-looking, the kind of person who'd spent decades in shipping and had the stress lines to prove it. Adrian Voss remained seated. He smiled when DeLuca approached, polite and utterly empty. Mr. DeLuca, thank you for meeting with us. Mr. Voss, I appreciate the invitation. DeLuca shook his hand, then gestured to Lena. My associate, Lena Brooks. She'll be sitting in. Voss's eyes flicked to Lena, dismissed her in half a second, and returned to DeLuca. Of course, please sit. The lunch proceeded with the careful choreography of professional negotiation. Chen outlined the collective's operations, their expansion plans, how they envisioned working with established Harborview operators. Vance discussed logistics, shipping routes, warehouse requirements, customs facilitation. Voss said very little, but Lena watched him, watched how he touched his water glass before Chen made certain points, a tiny signal she picked up on and adjusted her presentation. Watched how his foot tapped twice under the table when Vance started talking about customs, and Vance immediately shifted topics. Watched how he smiled at DeLuca's questions without the smile reaching his eyes. He was running this meeting. Chen and Vance were skilled professionals, but Voss was in control. The question, DeLuca said when Chen finished her pitch, is what you're really offering. Access to your shipping network is valuable, but you're asking for significant concessions in return. Warehouse space, route protection, integration with local operations. That's not cooperation, that's colonization. Strong word, Chen said, but she glanced at Voss before continuing. Accurate word, DeLuca replied. You're asking to use our infrastructure without contributing to its maintenance or protection. When local problems arise, who handles them? When federal attention increases, who takes the risk? Voss leaned forward slightly. Those are reasonable concerns. Perhaps we should discuss specific terms rather than theoretical frameworks. What would make this arrangement work for you, Mr. DeLuca? His voice was pleasant, reasonable, and Lena's skin crawled. I'd need guarantees, DeLuca said, that your operations won't draw undue attention, that you'll respect existing territorial agreements, that we're partners, not landlord and tenant. All reasonable. We're prepared to formalize those guarantees. Voss smiled again. In fact, we've drafted a preliminary agreement that addresses most of your concerns. Perhaps Ms. Brooks could review it while we discuss the broader strategic picture? He produced a folder, offered it to Lena. She took it, feeling like she'd just accepted something heavier than paper. The document was dense, legal language, specific terms, percentages, and timelines. But as she skimmed it, certain clauses jumped out. Dispute resolution through arbitration selected by the collective. Automatic renewal unless terminated with 6 months' notice. Penalties for breach of contract that seemed designed to make leaving impossible once you'd committed. It was a trap dressed up as a partnership. Lena caught DeLuca's eye, gave the smallest shake of her head. He nodded almost imperceptibly. This is comprehensive, DeLuca said, not reaching for the folder. Perhaps too comprehensive for a preliminary agreement. I'll need my legal team to review it, along with my financial people. These aren't decisions to make over lunch. Voss's smile didn't waver. Of course. We're not asking for immediate commitment, just initial interest. You have it. But I'm cautious by nature, Mr. Voss. I like to understand who I'm working with before committing to formal arrangements. Understandable. What would you like to know? Your background, for instance. Chen and Vance have extensive histories in shipping. You appear to have materialized from nowhere 6 months ago. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. Voss's smile finally shifted, becoming something sharper. I prefer to keep my past private. It's not relevant to our current business. It's relevant to me. I don't partner with ghosts. Then perhaps we're not a good fit. Voss stood, buttoning his jacket with precise movements. Thank you for your time, Mr. DeLuca. If you change your mind about requiring background checks on potential partners, you have our contact information. Chen and Vance stood too, looking uncomfortable. They'd lost control of the meeting without understanding how. DeLuca remained seated. I appreciate you coming. Safe travels back. After they left, DeLuca signaled for the check and turned to Lena. Well? He's lying about something big. The contract's designed to lock you in permanently, and he's definitely running their operation, not Chen. Agreed on all counts. Anything else? Lena hesitated, trying to articulate the crawling sensation Voss had triggered. He's not just a consultant, he's someone who needs to stay hidden, and he's using the collective as cover. When you pushed on his background, he didn't get defensive. He got cold, like you'd crossed a line. Which means he's either running from something or toward something, and either way, we don't want to be in the middle of it. DeLuca signed the check. Good catch on the contract. I'd have spotted it eventually, but you saved us time. Outside in DeLuca's car, heading back to the office, Marcus called. How'd it go? Poorly, which might be for the best, DeLuca said on speaker. The collective's not a partnership opportunity. It's a takeover dressed up as cooperation. We're passing. You sure? They've got resources, could be useful. They've also got Adrian Voss, who's a problem waiting to happen. Lena flagged it, and I trust her instincts. After the call ended, they drove in silence for a while before Lena asked the question that had been bothering her. What if they don't take no for an answer? Then they'll try to establish operations in Harborview without our cooperation, which will bring them into conflict with other local operators. They'll either adapt to how things work here, or they'll fail. Either way, it's not our problem unless they make it one. Except Lena had seen how Voss looked when DeLuca declined his offer. That wasn't someone who accepted failure gracefully. Over the next week, the Coastal Collective made their move. They approached smaller operators, ones without DeLuca's resources or caution, offering favorable terms for warehouse access and route protection. 3 different groups accepted. Marcus tracked the developments with increasing concern. They're building a network, not directly challenging major players yet, but establishing presence. Another few months and they'll have enough infrastructure to operate independently. Let them, DeLuca said during their morning briefing. As long as they stay in their lane and don't disrupt existing arrangements, they're not worth the energy to oppose. But Lena noticed something the others missed. The warehouses the collective had leased were all within a specific geographic area, a corridor running from the North Docks through the commercial district to the highway interchange. It looked random until you mapped it out. She pulled up a detailed city map on her laptop, marked the locations, and felt her stomach drop. They're building a supply route, she said, interrupting whatever DeLuca and Marcus were discussing. Look. She turned her laptop so they could see. The marked locations formed a clear line, each position offering visibility and control over the next. It's not random expansion, Lena continued. They're setting up infrastructure for moving something specific. High volume, needs direct highway access, has to avoid main commercial routes. Marcus studied the map. What moves in that volume through back channels? Drugs, Rita said from her corner. Or weapons. Something illegal enough to need this kind of careful routing, but profitable enough to justify the infrastructure investment. DeLuca's expression hardened. Which means they lied. This isn't about legitimate shipping expansion. And if they're moving drugs or weapons through our territory without clearing it, Marcus didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. It was exactly what Volkov had tried to do. We need to know what they're planning, DeLuca said. Specifically, what they're moving, when, and who's buying. Lena, I need you inside. Her stomach twisted. Inside how? They know I work for you now. Not with the collective, with one of their new partners. Small operation called Pacific Freight, just leased warehouse space from the collective last week. I have a contact there, someone who owes me a favor. You'd go in as an administrative hire, same cover as Volkov's operation. And if Voss recognizes me? Why would he? You were furniture at that lunch, took notes and said nothing. As far as the collective knows, you're a junior employee with no significance. DeLuca pulled up information on Pacific Freight. The owner, Raymond Torres, he's not sophisticated. Runs a small legitimate operation, probably took the collective's deal without understanding the implications. You'd be there to watch what the collective's actually doing with his warehouse space. Lena looked at the information, at Raymond Torres's photo showing a middle-aged man with worry lines and tired eyes. Someone in over his head, probably. When would I start? Tomorrow, if you're willing. Torres is expecting someone I'm sending to help with inventory management. He thinks it's a favor from me, helping him scale up his operation now that he's got collective backing. And my actual job? Document everything. Shipment manifests, timing patterns, who's coming and going, same as before, but we're looking for specific evidence of what the collective's really moving. Marcus added, and if you spot Adrian Voss anywhere near that warehouse, you get out immediately. Don't wait, don't try to hide. Just leave and call me. The urgency in his voice made it clear this wasn't standard caution. What do you know about Voss that you're not saying? Lena asked. DeLuca and Marcus exchanged looks. I made some calls, Marcus said finally. Reached out to contacts in other cities where the collective operates. Voss's name came up in connection with 3 different investigations: drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and a money laundering operation. Never charged, never arrested, but present around the edges of all 3 cases. So he's got federal protection? Or he's very good at staying one step ahead of evidence. Either way, he's dangerous. More dangerous than Volkov because he's smarter about it. Rita pulled up financial data. I've also been tracking the collective's money. They're funding this expansion through shell companies, same pattern as Volkov used, but the amounts are bigger. We're talking millions in infrastructure investment over just 3 weeks. That's not normal business expansion. That's preparation for something major. Lena thought about the supply route she'd mapped, about Voss's cold smile, about contracts designed to trap people into permanent arrangements. They're not just moving drugs or weapons through Harborview, she said slowly, pieces clicking together. They're planning to take over the whole distribution network. Use these small operators like Torres as cover, build the infrastructure, then either buy out or eliminate the major players who won't cooperate. DeLuca nodded. That's my assessment too. The question is timeline. How long before they're ready to move? And can we stop them before they establish enough presence to make removal impossible? I'll take the job at Pacific Freight, Lena said, but I want backup. Someone watching the warehouse, ready to pull me out if things go wrong. Marcus will handle it personally, DeLuca promised. You'll have full support. But Lena, this is more dangerous than the Volkov operation. He was local, predictable. Voss is something else. If your instincts say run, you run. Understood? She understood. She took the job anyway. Pacific Freight operated out of a warehouse that had seen better decades. Peeling paint, roll-up doors that squeaked, the persistent smell of diesel and old cardboard. Raymond Torres met Lena at the door, shaking her hand with genuine gratitude. Mr. DeLuca said you could help get our systems organized, he said, leading her inside. Since the collective's partnership started, volumes increased 300%. I can barely keep track anymore. The warehouse floor was chaos, pallets stacked haphazardly, paperwork scattered across a makeshift office desk, workers moving boxes without apparent system or oversight. When did the collective's shipments start arriving? Lena asked. About 4 days ago. They're using the North Bay for their inventory, keeping it separate from my regular clients. Torres pointed to a sectioned-off area with newer-looking shelving. They handle their own loading and unloading. I just provide the space. Do you know what they're storing? Electronics, they said. High-value items that need climate control, which is why they wanted this specific warehouse. He looked uncomfortable. I don't ask too many questions. The money's good, and DeLuca vouched for them. Lena made a mental note to tell DeLuca that Torres thought he'd endorsed the collective. Someone was lying to someone, and she needed to know who. She spent the first day organizing Torres's legitimate inventory, creating systems that actually made sense, earning his trust by making his life easier. But she watched the collective section carefully. 3 trucks arrived that first day. Each one parked in the North Bay for exactly 20 minutes. Workers unloaded specific crates marked with codes that didn't match standard shipping manifests. Then the trucks left. The workers, clearly not Torres's regular people, moved with military efficiency. Lena photographed the crate codes when no one was looking, sent them to Rita for analysis. Rita's response came back within an hour. Those codes don't match any legitimate shipping system I can find. Custom inventory tracking, probably. Which meant the collective was running a parallel operation invisible to standard logistics tracking. Day 2, Lena volunteered to help with inventory in the North Bay. Torres was grateful. His people were overwhelmed and gave her access without question. The crates contained electronics, like Torres had been told, but wrapped in very specific ways, packed with materials designed to block X-ray scanning and density detection. Lena had seen enough from her briefings to recognize smuggling preparation when she saw it. She managed to open one crate when the workers took their break. Inside, phones, hundreds of them, still in packaging, various models and carriers. Not drugs, not weapons, phones. She photographed the contents, closed the crate carefully, and tried to understand why the Coastal Collective would smuggle phones through an elaborate underground network. Marcus called that night. Burner phones. They're setting up a communication network that's untraceable, probably for coordinating whatever their main operation is. That seems like a lot of infrastructure for phone distribution, unless they're planning something that requires secure communication for hundreds of people simultaneously. Military-grade operation security. The implications made Lena's hands shake. This wasn't just smuggling. This was preparation for something coordinated and large-scale. Day 3, Adrian Voss showed up at the warehouse. Lena saw him through the office window, walking the North Bay with 2 associates she didn't recognize. Her heart kicked into overdrive. She ducked behind a filing cabinet, pulled out her phone, texted Marcus, "Voss is here." His response was immediate. "Stay hidden. Do not engage. I'm 5 minutes out." But Voss was walking toward the office. Lena looked around frantically. The office had 2 doors, one to the warehouse floor where Voss was approaching, one to a back hallway that led to the loading docks. She grabbed her jacket and backpack, trying to look like she was leaving for lunch rather than fleeing. The door opened. "Can I help you?" Torres's voice, confused. "Just inspecting our inventory space." Voss's voice, pleasant and dangerous. "And who's this?" Lena turned, forcing her expression neutral. Voss stood in the doorway, those predator eyes focusing on her. "Lena Brooks," she said. "Inventory management. Mr. Torres hired me to help organize the warehouse." Recognition didn't flicker across Voss's face. He looked at her the same way he had at the restaurant. Brief assessment, immediate dismissal. "I see. And you have access to our storage area?" "I help coordinate all inventory in the facility. Mr. Torres asked me to make sure everything's tracked properly." "Commendable," Voss smiled. "I'm sure you'll maintain appropriate discretion about our operations here." "Of course, client confidentiality is standard." He studied her for another moment, then nodded. "Good. Carry on." He left, and Lena's knees almost gave out. Torres looked worried. "Was that okay? I didn't think—" "It's fine," Lena assured him, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm going to take lunch now. Back in an hour." She made it to her car before the shaking started. Marcus found her in a coffee shop 3 blocks away, sitting in the corner booth with her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. "You all right?" He didn't recognize me, looked right at me and didn't remember. She laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. "I'm that forgettable." "In this business, that's a survival trait." Marcus sat across from her. "What was he doing there?" "Inspecting, making sure Torres is complying with whatever arrangement they have." Lena pulled out her phone, showed Marcus the photos. "They're moving burner phones, hundreds of them." Marcus studied the images, his expression growing darker. "This is bigger than we thought. You need to pull out." "I can get more. Figure out what they're planning." "No, Voss being there personally means this operation's important enough to warrant his attention. That makes it too dangerous for you to keep pushing." He stood. "Come on. We're telling DeLuca you're done at Pacific Freight." But as they walked to Marcus's car, Lena spotted something that made her stop. Across the street, parked in a loading zone, was a black SUV. 2 men inside, watching the warehouse. They weren't collective people. Lena had memorized those faces. They weren't local operators. They were something else. "Marcus," she said quietly, "we're being watched." He followed her gaze, tensed. "Federal." "How do you know?" "Haircuts, the way they're sitting, that's FBI surveillance posture." He guided Lena to his car, not rushing, but not dawdling. "Which means the feds are already investigating the collective. Which means we need to get very far away from this operation before we accidentally become part of their case." They drove back to DeLuca's office in tense silence, and Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just barely avoided stepping into something much worse than they'd realized. DeLuca listened to their report with the focus of someone calculating risks and outcomes. Federal investigation, he said when they finished. That changes everything. How? Lena asked. Because if the FBI is watching the collective and you're working inside a collective operation, you become a person of interest. They'll start investigating you, which leads them to me, which creates exactly the kind of attention I've spent years avoiding. He stood, walked to the windows overlooking the harbor. We pull back entirely. Let the feds handle Voss and the collective. What about Torres? Lena asked. He's not criminal, just desperate. When the feds raid that warehouse, he'll get caught up in it. That's unfortunate, but not our problem. We could warn him. DeLuca turned. And if he warns the collective, who realizes someone inside their operation is feeding information to their competitors? Who do they suspect? You. Then Voss starts asking questions, connects you back to me, and we're in the middle of a federal investigation and a war with the collective simultaneously. He was right. Lena knew he was right, but thinking about Torres, a man just trying to keep his business alive, getting arrested because he'd trusted the wrong people made her feel sick. There has to be something we can do, she said. There isn't. Not without unacceptable risk. DeLuca's voice was final. You're done at Pacific Freight. Tomorrow you call Torres, tell him you got a better offer, apologize for the short notice. Then you disappear from anything connected to the collective, understood? Lena nodded, but she didn't feel good about it. That night, alone in her apartment, she stared at the photos on her phone. The burner phones, the crate codes, the military-efficient workers. Evidence of something significant that she didn't fully understand. She thought about calling Torres anyway, warning him. But DeLuca was right about the risk. One wrong move and she'd expose herself, expose DeLuca's entire organization. So she did nothing, and hated herself a little for it. The call from Torres came 3 days later, and Lena almost didn't answer. She'd been avoiding her phone, avoiding the guilt that came with knowing she'd walked away from someone who'd trusted her. But the ringing persisted, and finally she picked up. Lena? Torres's voice was frantic, breathless. I need help. The feds are here. They're tearing apart the warehouse. They're saying I'm part of some smuggling operation. I didn't know. Mr. Torres, you need to call a lawyer. Don't say anything to them without... I already talked to them. I told them everything. About the collective, about the phones, about... He stopped. I told them about you. Lena's stomach turned to ice. What did you tell them about me? That DeLuca sent you to help me. That you were organizing inventory. They asked if you had access to the collective storage area, and I said, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't think... It's okay, Lena said, her mind racing. It's okay. Just get a lawyer. Don't say anything else. She hung up and immediately called Marcus. We have a problem. 20 minutes later, she was in DeLuca's office with Marcus and Rita, all of them looking at her like she'd just announced incoming artillery. The FBI knows you were inside Pacific Freight, DeLuca said, his voice carefully controlled. They know you had access to the collective's operation. They're going to want to talk to you. What do I tell them? The truth. Mostly. He pulled up notes on his tablet. You were hired by Torres to help with inventory management. You noticed unusual activity from the collective's shipments, but didn't understand what it meant. You're a civilian employee with no knowledge of illegal operations. They won't believe that. They don't have to believe it. They just need to not have evidence to the contrary. DeLuca's expression was serious. This is important, Lena. The FBI is investigating the collective, not us. As long as you don't give them reason to expand their investigation, we stay clean. But if you mention working for me, if you connect any dots between my organization and your presence at Pacific Freight, I become a federal witness and you become a target, Lena finished. Exactly. Marcus added, they'll probably offer you immunity in exchange for cooperation. Don't take it. Tell them you want a lawyer present for any further conversations, then call the number Rita's about to give you. Rita handed Lena a business card. Criminal defense attorney, one of the best in the city. She knows how to handle federal investigators. Let her do the talking. The FBI showed up at Lena's apartment the next morning. 2 agents, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and a younger man who looked like he'd just graduated from the academy. They were polite, professional, and absolutely certain they had leverage. Miss Brooks, I'm Agent Sarah Brennan. This is Agent Michael Torres. No relation to Raymond Torres, coincidentally. We'd like to ask you some questions about your employment at Pacific Freight. Lena let them in because refusing would look suspicious, but she kept the door open and stayed standing. "I'm happy to cooperate," she said, "but I'd prefer to have my attorney present for any formal questioning." Agent Brennan smiled. "This isn't formal. We're just gathering information about a case we're building. You're not under investigation." "Then you won't mind if I have representation anyway." The smile didn't waver. "Of course, but I should mention that we're offering immunity to individuals who provide useful information about the Coastal Collective's operations. That offer has a limited window." "I appreciate that. My attorney will be in touch to schedule a time." They left, but Lena saw how Brennan's expression shifted on the way out. She'd been categorized, not as a cooperative witness, but as someone with something to hide. The attorney, Margaret Chen, was everything Rita had promised: sharp, experienced, and completely unimpressed by federal pressure tactics. "They have nothing on you," she said during their first meeting. "You worked at Pacific Freight for 3 days, organized inventory, and left for a better opportunity. That's not a crime. They want you to give them information about DeLuca, which you won't do because you don't work for him in any capacity they can prove." "I do work for him as a legitimate business consultant, which is exactly what your employment records show, what your tax filings will reflect, and what you'll testify to if it ever comes to that." Margaret leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. The FBI will keep pushing, looking for leverage. They might imply you're in danger, that cooperating is your only option. They might suggest DeLuca is using you. Ignore all of it. Stay calm. Answer only the questions I approve, and let me handle everything else." The formal interview happened a week later at the FBI field office downtown. Lena sat in a windowless room with Margaret beside her, facing agents Brennan and Torres across a metal table. "Let's start simple," Brennan said, sliding a photo across the table. "Do you recognize this man?" Adrian Voss, caught on surveillance camera outside Pacific Freight. "I saw him once at the warehouse," Lena said. "He was inspecting the collective's inventory area." "Did you speak with him?" "Briefly. He asked who I was. I told him I was helping Mr. Torres with organization. That was it." "And you didn't think it was strange that someone was inspecting a warehouse operation?" "I thought he was a client representative. I'd worked in shipping before. That's normal." Brennan pulled out more photos. The crates, the burner phones, shipping manifests with the codes Lena had documented. "Did you see these items during your employment?" Margaret touched Lena's arm lightly. "Answer carefully." "I saw crates in the collective's storage area. Mr. Torres told me they contained electronics. I didn't open them or examine the contents." "But you did take photographs." Brennan produced printouts of the photos from Lena's phone, the ones she'd sent to Rita. Lena's heart stopped. How did they have those? Margaret's expression didn't change. "What's the source of these images?" "They were uploaded to a cloud service from Miss Brooks's phone number." "Do you have a warrant for my client's phone records?" "We have a warrant for Raymond Torres's business communications, which included messages from Miss Brooks containing these images." Torres had never deleted their text exchanges. Of course he hadn't. "My client took inventory photos as part of her job responsibilities," Margaret said smoothly. "Standard practice in warehouse management. If you're suggesting that's evidence of criminal activity, you'll need to be more specific." The interview continued for another hour, circling the same questions from different angles. Lena stuck to her story. She was a civilian employee. She documented inventory. She didn't know about any illegal operations. Margaret deflected anything more substantive. Finally, Brennan sat back. "Miss Brooks, we know you're connected to Marco DeLuca. We know he has extensive operations in Harborview that exist in gray areas of the law. We're not interested in pursuing him for those activities. We're focused on the Coastal Collective. But we need to understand the relationship between DeLuca's organization and theirs." "My client has no such knowledge," Margaret said. "Then why was she inside a collective operation taking photographs?" "Doing her job. If the FBI wants to build a case against the collective, I suggest investigating the collective rather than harassing civilian employees of legitimate shipping companies." Brennan's jaw tightened. "We're offering immunity, Miss Brooks. Full protection in exchange for testimony about what you saw and who sent you to Pacific Freight. This is your one chance." Lena looked at Margaret, who gave the smallest headshake. "I appreciate the offer," Lena said, "but I don't have information worth immunity. I worked at a warehouse for 3 days. That's all. The meeting ended there, and Margaret walked Lena out with a hand on her shoulder that was probably meant to be reassuring but felt like being steered away from a cliff edge. They'll keep trying, Margaret said outside the federal building. But they don't have enough to compel testimony, and as long as you stick to your story, they never will. DeLuca chose well when he brought you in. You're good under pressure. Lena wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an indictment of how much her life had changed. That night, back in DeLuca's office, the mood was tense. The FBI has your photos, Marcus said, stating the obvious, which means they know you were documenting the collective's operation, which means they'll keep digging until they understand why. Margaret says they can't prove anything beyond me doing my job. Margaret's good, but federal investigators are patient. They'll build their case piece by piece. DeLuca stood at his window, looking out at the harbor. The question is what the collective does when they find out the FBI has detailed photographic evidence from inside their operation. Rita looked up from her laptop. They'll assume someone inside Pacific Freight was cooperating with the feds. They'll review who had access, and Lena's name will come up. But I wasn't cooperating with the feds. Lena stopped. She'd been spying for DeLuca, which was arguably worse from the collective's perspective. Exactly, DeLuca said. Which means Adrian Voss is going to start asking questions about you. And eventually, probably soon, he's going to connect you to me. The implications settled over the room like smoke. So what do we do? Lena asked. We have 2 options. 1, you disappear. New city, new identity, courtesy of my resources. You'd be safe, but you'd be gone. And option 2? DeLuca turned from the window. We finish this. We give the FBI what they need to take down the collective completely, but we do it in a way that keeps you and my organization out of the crossfire. How? By being smarter than Voss. DeLuca pulled up information on his tablet, shipping manifests, financial records, surveillance photos. The FBI is investigating the burner phones, but that's not the collective's real operation. It's infrastructure for something bigger. We figure out what that is, we hand it to the feds with a bow, and they arrest everyone involved before the collective realizes we were involved. Marcus frowned. That requires getting back inside their operation, after Lena's already been flagged. Not Lena, me. DeLuca's expression was calm, certain. The collective approached me for partnership. I declined, but I could reconsider. Tell them I've thought about their offer, that I'm interested in discussing terms. They'll be suspicious, Rita said. Of course they will. But they're also opportunistic. If I'm offering cooperation, Voss will take the meeting to see what I know and what I want. That gives us access. Lena understood where this was going. And while you're meeting with Voss, someone else is gathering evidence about their real operation. Exactly. Rita can track their financial movements remotely. Marcus can coordinate surveillance, and you, DeLuca looked at her. You're the one who sees patterns. I need you to analyze everything we gather and figure out what the collective's actual endgame is. It was risky, possibly stupid, but sitting around waiting for either the FBI or the collective to make a move felt worse. When do we start? Lena asked. DeLuca made the call that night, speaking to Catherine Chen with a tone that suggested careful reconsideration rather than capitulation. I've been thinking about our conversation, he said. Perhaps I was too hasty in my assessment. I'd like to discuss terms again, if the offer still stands. Chen sounded surprised but pleased. Of course, Mr. DeLuca. I'm sure we can arrange something mutually beneficial. Would you be available to meet this week? Tomorrow, if possible. I prefer to move quickly once I've made a decision. They scheduled a meeting for the next afternoon at the same restaurant. Neutral ground, public space, all the careful choreography of professional criminals pretending to be businessmen. This time, Lena wouldn't attend. She'd be in DeLuca's office with Rita, monitoring communications and analyzing data while Marcus coordinated physical surveillance. I don't like you going in alone, Marcus said while they prepared. I won't be alone. You'll have people positioned nearby. Not close enough to help if Voss decides this is a trap. It's not a trap. It's theater. DeLuca checked his watch. Voss wants to believe I'm reconsidering because he wants access to my distribution network. His ego will override his caution. Lena hoped he was right. The meeting started at 2 p.m. Lena watched from the office via a secure feed Marcus had set up. Nothing visual, just audio from a device DeLuca wore that looked like a regular watch. Chen and Vance were there again, along with Voss. The conversation started carefully, feeling out whether DeLuca's change of heart was genuine. "I appreciate you reconsidering," Chen said. "What changed your mind?" "Pragmatism. The collective's expanding regardless of whether I participate. Better to be part of that expansion than opposed to it." DeLuca's voice was smooth, convincing. "But I have conditions." "We expected you would," Voss said. "What do you need?" "Complete transparency about your operations in Harborview. I don't partner with people whose activities I don't understand. Whatever you're moving through Pacific Freight and the other warehouses, I need to know what it is, where it's going, and who's buying." A pause. Lena held her breath. "That's sensitive information," Chen said carefully. "Then we don't have a partnership. I'm not interested in being surprised by federal raids or gang violence because I didn't know what I was facilitating." DeLuca's tone was firm. Transparency or nothing. Another pause, longer. Then Voss spoke. "We're establishing a distribution network for pharmaceuticals. Legitimate product, but sourced through channels that bypass normal regulatory frameworks. The burner phones are for coordinating delivery drivers and ensuring communication security." It was a lie. Lena could hear it in how precisely Voss spoke, like he'd rehearsed the explanation. DeLuca apparently heard it too. "Pharmaceuticals, that's your story?" "It's the truth." "Then you won't mind if I verify that independently before committing resources?" Voss's voice cooled. "How would you verify it?" "I have people who can examine inventory, trace supply chains, standard due diligence for any major partnership. We'd prefer to keep operational details private until formal agreements are signed. And I'd prefer not to sign agreements based on incomplete information. We seem to have reached an impasse." The conversation continued, circling around the same fundamental disagreement. Voss wouldn't provide real transparency. DeLuca wouldn't commit without it. After 30 minutes, they agreed to table the discussion and reconvene after both sides had considered their positions, which meant nothing had been resolved, but DeLuca had made his point. Back at the office, he looked frustrated. He's not going to give up what they're really doing. Too smart for that. "But we learned something," Rita said, pulling up financial data. "While you were in that meeting, I traced payment flows from the collective's shell companies. They're not buying pharmaceuticals. They're buying precursor chemicals, the kind used to manufacture synthetic drugs in bulk." Lena felt pieces clicking together. "The burner phones aren't for distribution. They're for coordinating production facilities. And the warehouses aren't storage. They're manufacturing sites." "Exactly," Rita continued. "The collective's not moving drugs through Harborview. They're making them here using local infrastructure, then distributing nationwide. That's why they needed partnership with operators like Torres. They're building a manufacturing network." Marcus swore. "If they're running meth labs or fentanyl production out of those warehouses and the FBI raids them, Torres and every other small operator who partnered with them gets arrested for drug manufacturing. The collective's leadership claims they were legitimate investors who had no knowledge of illegal activities, and they walk away clean while everyone else burns." DeLuca's expression was cold. Voss set it up perfectly. Use desperate operators as fronts, establish production, then disappear when enforcement comes. He's done this before, in the other cities. That's why he's never been charged. He's never directly connected to the operations when they collapse. "So what do we do?" Lena asked. "We prove the connection. Show that Voss and the collective leadership knew exactly what they were setting up. Get that evidence to the FBI before they raid the warehouses, so when arrests happen, they get everyone including Voss. How do we prove knowledge?" Rita smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "By making them document it themselves." The plan Rita outlined was elegant and dangerous. She'd continue monitoring the collective's financial systems, but now she'd plant audit trails. Small discrepancies in the accounts that would force the collective to generate internal documentation explaining their actual operations. "Accountants hate unexplained variances," Rita explained. "If I make it look like money's disappearing or being misallocated, their financial team will create memos tracing where funds actually went. Those memos will reference the precursor chemicals, the manufacturing setup, everything they've been trying to keep hidden. And then those memos become discoverable evidence in a federal investigation," Marcus said, understanding the play. Exactly. We don't have to prove anything directly. We just have to make them prove it to themselves, then ensure the FBI finds the proof. How long will that take? DeLuca asked. A week, maybe 2. I need time to introduce the variances gradually so they don't trigger security reviews. But once the documentation exists, I can ensure it gets to the right people. DeLuca nodded. Do it, but carefully. If the collective suspects their systems are compromised, they'll burn everything and disappear, I know. Rita's fingers were already moving across her keyboard. I'll be careful. The waiting was worse than the action, like always. Lena spent the next 10 days analyzing everything they had on the collective, building profiles of their key people, mapping connections that might prove useful. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. On day 8, Marcus got a call from one of his surveillance people. There's unusual activity at Pacific Freight. Multiple vehicles, people moving equipment out. Looks like they're shutting down the operation. They're spooked, DeLuca said when Marcus reported it. Something made them nervous. Rita checked her systems. The financial variances I planted, they noticed them faster than expected. There's internal communication about a possible security breach. How long before they trace it to you? I covered my tracks, but if they bring in serious forensic analysts, maybe 48 hours. Less if they're motivated. DeLuca made a decision. We move now. Rita, compile everything you have and send it to the FBI anonymously. Include the financial records, the chemical purchases, the property leases, everything that connects Voss to the manufacturing operations. That exposes our involvement, Marcus said. Only if the FBI looks closely enough to trace the source, and they won't. They'll be too focused on the evidence itself. DeLuca turned to Lena. I need you to make one more call. To Agent Brennan. Lena's stomach dropped. And tell her what? That you've been thinking about her immunity offer. That you might have information about the collective's operations in exchange for protection. She'll meet with you, and during that meeting, an anonymous package containing Rita's evidence will be delivered to the FBI field office. By the time your meeting ends, they'll be mobilizing to raid every collective property in the city. Won't Brennan suspect I'm the source of the package? She'll suspect, but she won't care. Federal prosecutors want convictions, not credit. As long as the evidence is solid, they'll move on it. It was the closest thing to a clean exit they had. Lena made the call. Agent Brennan sounded pleased but cautious when Lena said she was reconsidering cooperation. They scheduled a meeting for the next morning, same federal building, same windowless interview room. This time, Margaret wasn't present. This time, Lena was there to perform. I've been thinking about your offer, she told Brennan, about immunity and protection. I might have information that's useful. What kind of information? About what the collective's really doing. It's not just smuggling phones. Lena paused, letting uncertainty show. But I need guarantees. If I give you this, I need to know I'm safe. That depends on what you give us. Manufacturing. They're setting up drug production facilities in the warehouses they've leased. Using local operators as fronts, so when you raid them, the collective leadership stays clean. Brennan's expression sharpened. How do you know this? I saw equipment being moved into Pacific Freight that didn't make sense for storage. Ventilation systems, specialized containers, and I overheard conversations about production schedules. It was mostly lies, but plausible lies. Brennan was buying it. We'll need specifics, locations, names, dates. I can provide what I remember, but I need immunity first in writing. They were still negotiating details when another agent entered the room, whispered something to Brennan. Her expression changed completely. Excuse me for a moment, Miss Brooks. She left, and Lena counted seconds. 1 minute. 5. 10. When Brennan returned, her entire demeanor had shifted to urgent professionalism. Miss Brooks, we're going to need to continue this conversation later. Something's come up that requires immediate attention. What happened? That's classified. But I want you to stay available. Don't leave the city. The anonymous package had arrived. The FBI was moving. Lena called Marcus from her car. They got it. Brennan cut the meeting short. She looked like someone had just handed her Christmas. Good. Get back here. We need to monitor how this unfolds. The raids happened that afternoon, coordinated across 6 locations simultaneously. Lena watched news coverage with DeLuca, Marcus, and Rita as federal agents swarmed warehouses, arrested workers, seized equipment, and chemicals. Pacific Freight was one of the targets. Torres was led out in handcuffs, looking bewildered and terrified. "He didn't know," Lena said quietly. "He was just trying to save his business." "And he made a deal with criminals without understanding the consequences," DeLuca replied. "That's not your fault." But it felt like it was. Lena had walked away from Torres, had let him stumble into federal charges rather than risk exposing herself. That was the cost of survival in this world, other people's destruction. The news coverage continued through the evening. 23 arrests, including several collective employees, massive drug manufacturing operation dismantled, federal prosecutors calling it one of the largest synthetic drug busts in the region. But no mention of Adrian Voss, or Catherine Chen, or Thomas Vance. They weren't at any of the warehouses, Marcus said, monitoring police scanners. "They're not in custody." Rita pulled up airline records. Private flight left Harborview Airport 3 hours ago. Destination unknown, but it filed a flight plan for Mexico City. DeLuca's jaw tightened. Voss knew. Somehow he knew the raids were coming and got out ahead of them. "How?" Lena asked. "We were careful." Rita covered her tracks. "We were careful with the FBI. But maybe Voss has his own sources inside federal law enforcement, or maybe he's just paranoid enough to have contingency plans for exactly this scenario." DeLuca turned off the news. "Either way, he's gone." "The operation's shut down, though," Marcus pointed out. "The warehouses are seized, the workers arrested. Even if Voss escaped, the collective's finished in Harborview. For now. But men like Voss don't stop. They regroup, find new territory, build again." DeLuca looked at Lena. "Which means this isn't over. He'll remember that someone fed intelligence to the FBI. Eventually, he'll start investigating who, and that trail could lead back to us." The implication was clear. Lena had made an enemy, one with resources and patience. "So what do I do?" she asked. "You stay alert. You continue working for me, getting better at this, until you're skilled enough that Voss coming after you is his problem, not yours." DeLuca's expression softened fractionally. "You've proven yourself, Lena. You see things others miss, you stay calm under pressure, and you make hard choices when necessary. Those are rare qualities, but they also make you a target." It wasn't encouraging, but it was honest. The FBI called 2 days later. Agent Brennan wanted another meeting, this time with formal immunity paperwork ready for Lena to sign in exchange for testimony about the collective's operations. Margaret Chen advised against it. "You give testimony, you become part of their case. That means depositions, possible trial appearances, your name in federal documents. It exposes you. But if I refuse, they'll be suspicious. They're already suspicious. The question is whether you want to formalize that suspicion into documented cooperation." Margaret tapped her pen against her notepad. "My advice? Decline the immunity. Tell them you've reconsidered, that you're not comfortable being involved in a federal case. They'll be annoyed, but they can't compel testimony you haven't agreed to provide." Lena followed the advice. Brennan was, as predicted, annoyed. "You came to us, Miss Brooks. You said you wanted immunity." "I was scared. I thought I needed protection. But I've thought about it more and I don't want to be involved in this." "You're already involved. You worked at a facility that was manufacturing illegal drugs." "For 3 days, as an inventory clerk. I didn't know what was happening." "Then testifying shouldn't be a problem." "It's a problem because I don't want to spend the next year dealing with lawyers and trials and having my name associated with a drug trafficking case. I'm sorry, Agent Brennan. I can't help you." The agent's expression suggested she thought Lena was making a mistake, but there was nothing she could legally do about it. The interview ended there, and Lena walked out feeling like she'd just barely avoided stepping into quicksand. 3 weeks later, the federal case against the collective's arrested members moved forward without her testimony. Prosecutors had enough evidence from the seized warehouses, from financial records, from workers who'd agreed to cooperate. 23 arrests became 19 convictions, including several mid-level collective operatives. But still no Adrian Voss. Lena tried to move on. She worked for DeLuca, attending meetings and analyzing patterns, getting better at reading people and situations. She saw Margaret Chen's therapist, who helped her process the accumulated stress of living in constant low-level danger. She started sleeping better, eating regularly, feeling almost normal, but she never stopped looking over her shoulder. 2 months after the raids, Marcus pulled her aside after a routine meeting. We have a problem. One of my sources says someone's been asking questions about you, specifically asking who you worked for before Pacific Freight. Lena's chest tightened. Voss? Probably. Could be someone else, but the timing fits. Whoever it is, they're being careful, using intermediaries, not leaving obvious trails, but they're definitely looking. What do I do? Marcus considered. You have options. DeLuca can provide more security, upgrade your apartment's protection, or you can go proactive, try to identify who's investigating and why. How would I do that? By being bait. Let them find you, then follow them back to whoever's asking questions. It was risky and possibly stupid, but Lena was tired of waiting for threats to materialize. Set it up, she said. The plan Marcus designed was simple. Lena would resume her old patterns, going to places she used to frequent, taking predictable routes, making herself visible in ways she'd been avoiding. Meanwhile, Marcus's people would watch for surveillance, for anyone taking unusual interest. It took 4 days. Lena was having coffee at a shop near her old apartment when Marcus texted, "You have a tail. White sedan, 2 occupants. Stay where you are." She forced herself to keep reading her book, to not look around, to be oblivious. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 20 minutes later, Marcus slid into the chair across from her. "They're still watching. I've got people on them, but I need you to move. Walk to your car. Drive your normal route home. Let's see where they go." Lena did exactly that, her hand steady on the wheel despite the fear coursing through her. The white sedan followed at a careful distance. Marcus's team followed the sedan. At her apartment, Lena went inside and waited. An hour later, Marcus called. "They didn't follow you into the building, just confirmed your address and left. My people stayed on them." "And? They went to a hotel downtown, nice place. I've got eyes on the room they checked into." "Whose room is it?" "That's the interesting part. It's registered to a shell company out of Delaware. But the person who checked in?" Marcus paused. "It's not Voss. It's someone else. Someone who looks a lot like federal law enforcement." Lena's confusion must have shown in her silence. "The FBI is still investigating you," Marcus continued. "Not for crimes. They don't have evidence for that. But they want to know why you were really at Pacific Freight. Brennan thinks you were working for someone, and she's trying to figure out who." "So it's not Voss?" "Might be both. Might be that Voss put out inquiries, the FBI picked them up, and now everyone's curious." Marcus sounded tired. "Either way, you've got attention you don't want. We need to decide how to handle it." DeLuca's solution was characteristically direct. "We give them something else to focus on. A story that explains your presence at Pacific Freight without connecting you to me." "What kind of story?" "The truth, mostly. You were working as inventory clerk, you noticed unusual activity, you documented it because you thought something illegal might be happening. When you realized the scale of it, you got scared and left. Later, when the FBI came asking questions, you were too frightened to cooperate fully. It's a reasonable narrative, except it doesn't explain why I took photos and sent them to Rita. It does if you were sending them to yourself, making your own insurance in case the collective came after you for noticing too much." DeLuca pulled up a fabricated email trail Rita had created. "These show you emailing the photos to a personal account, not to anyone else. The FBI can verify the account exists, confirm it's yours, and conclude you were protecting yourself rather than working for a competitor. Will they believe it? They'll have doubts. But doubts aren't evidence. As long as your story is consistent and there's no proof to the contrary, they'll eventually move on to more productive investigations." It meant more interviews, more careful lies, more living with the stress of federal scrutiny. But it was better than the alternatives. Lena met with Agent Brennan one final time, with Margaret present and the fabricated evidence ready. "I want to clarify some things," Lena said, "about Pacific Freight and why I took those photos." She walked through the story DeLuca had crafted. Brennan listened with obvious skepticism, but when Margaret presented the email evidence, the agent's expression shifted. "You were creating documentation to protect yourself," Brennan said slowly. "I was scared. I thought if the collective realized I'd noticed their operation, I might need proof that I'd tried to report it. But you didn't report it. I didn't know who to trust. For all I knew, they had connections in law enforcement. It was exactly paranoid enough to be believable." Brennan asked more questions, probed for inconsistencies, but Lena's story held. Finally, the agent sat back. All right, Miss Brooks, I think we're done here. But let me give you some advice. If you find yourself in a situation like this again, come to us immediately. Trying to handle it yourself just makes everything more complicated. I understand. Thank you. Walking out of the federal building, Lena felt something release in her chest. Not relief exactly. She knew Brennan would keep watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. But the immediate pressure was gone. You did well, Margaret said. They'll close this angle of their investigation. You're clear. Clear felt like an overstatement, but Lena would take it. Back at her apartment that night, alone with a glass of wine she barely touched, Lena thought about the past 3 months. She'd gone from invisible waitress to corporate spy to federal person of interest to something else entirely. Someone who understood how power moved in the shadows, who could read deception and navigate danger. Someone who couldn't go back to serving coffee and pretending the world was simple. Her phone buzzed. DeLuca. Good work today. Take tomorrow off. You've earned it. She smiled despite everything. 3 months ago, a text from her boss would have meant nothing. Now it felt like validation from someone whose opinion actually mattered. The next morning, Lena walked into Sal's diner for the first time since leaving. The place looked exactly the same. Flickering lights, cracked vinyl, the smell of burnt coffee. Deborah was working the counter, and her face lit up when she saw Lena. Oh my God, I thought you disappeared. Where have you been? New job, better pay. Lena slid onto a bar stool. How's everything here? Same as always. Boring, but boring's good, right? Deborah poured coffee without asking. You look different, like more, I don't know, put together? Lena glanced at her reflection in the diner's window. Deborah was right. She stood differently now, carried herself with a confidence that hadn't existed 3 months ago. I guess things changed, she said. They talked for a while, catching up on diner gossip that felt like news from another planet. When Lena finally left, Deborah called after her. You should come back more often. We miss you around here. But Lena knew she wouldn't. This place was her past, and she'd moved into something else entirely. Walking to her car, she noticed a man sitting in the window booth, 50s, nervous energy, checking his phone every 30 seconds. 2 other men entered the diner, moved toward him with the kind of purpose that made Lena's instincts scream. She recognized the pattern instantly. The nervous man was in trouble, possibly didn't even know it yet. The 2 approaching men were there to deliver a message or worse. 3 months ago, Lena would have looked away, would have told herself it wasn't her business, that getting involved only brought danger. Now she hesitated. The men were getting closer. The nervous man looked up, recognized something in their faces, and went pale. Lena made a choice. She walked back into the diner, moved directly to the nervous man's booth, and sat down across from him like they'd planned to meet. Sorry I'm late, she said loudly enough for the approaching men to hear. Traffic was terrible. The nervous man stared at her confused. The 2 men stopped, reassessing the situation. I think you have the wrong person, the nervous man said quietly. No, I don't. We had an appointment, remember? To discuss that business opportunity. Lena pulled out her phone, pretended to check something. You said noon, right? Understanding flickered across the man's face. He was quick. She'd give him that. Right. Yes. The business opportunity. I'm sorry, I forgot. The 2 men exchanged glances, then continued past the booth to the counter. They ordered coffee, but their attention stayed on Lena and the nervous man. Who are you? The man whispered. Someone who knows trouble when I see it. Those men are here for you, and whatever they want, it's not good. So we're going to sit here and have a very visible conversation for the next 10 minutes. Then you're going to leave with me and go somewhere safe. Understand? Why would you help me? Lena thought about DeLuca, about learning to see patterns and make hard choices, about understanding that small interventions could shift entire trajectories. Because someone helped me once. Now it's my turn. They talked about nothing for exactly 10 minutes. Lena made it look like a business meeting, using words she'd learned from Rita about logistics and distribution. The 2 men at the counter watched, but didn't approach. Finally, Lena stood. All right, let me walk you to your car. We can continue this discussion somewhere more private. Outside, the nervous man's hands were shaking. Those men work for someone I owe money to. A lot of money. I thought I could negotiate, but where's your car? I took a bus. I don't have... Get in mine. Lena unlocked her car, gestured for him to get in the passenger seat. I know someone who can help with debt problems. No promises, but he's fair. She drove him to DeLuca's office, called ahead to explain the situation. Marcus met them in the lobby, assessed the nervous man with professional efficiency. DeLuca will see you, Marcus said, but he'll want to know everything. Who you owe, how much, why. No lies. The nervous man nodded, disappeared into the elevator with Marcus. Lena waited in her car, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or done something worthwhile. Her phone buzzed. DeLuca. Interesting choice, bringing me a stranger with debt problems. What made you think I'd help? Lena. You helped me. Thought maybe you'd extend that to someone else who needed it. DeLuca. He owes $40,000 to a loan shark who's charging criminal interest. It's manageable. I'll handle it in exchange for consulting work from him. He's a forensic accountant, which is useful. You have good instincts for finding valuable people. Lena smiled. She'd saved someone today. Maybe not in the dramatic way she'd saved DeLuca that first night, but in a way that mattered. She drove home feeling like she'd finally understood something important. The world was full of people in trouble, people who needed someone to notice, someone to act. For most of her life, she'd been one of those people, invisible, struggling, hoping someone would see her. Now she was the one who saw, who noticed, who could make the choice to help or walk away. That was power, real power, the kind that didn't come from violence or money or connections, the kind that came from paying attention and giving a damn about what you saw. 3 months ago, Lena Brooks had been a waitress surviving day to day, invisible and safe in her insignificance. Now she was someone else entirely. Someone who understood that the smallest voice at the right moment could shift the balance of everything, and she was just getting started.